Good morning, everybody. My name is Councillor James Pasternak. I'm the chair of the Infrastructure Environment Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, and I'd like to now call meeting 15 to order. Welcome, everybody. Today's meeting is being held by video conference. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. As City Hall remains closed, the public will continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I ask for everyone for their patience with any delays or technical issues. The clerk staff have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Infrastructure Environment Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Clerk's IT staff are also available to assist members and their devices. I would like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they need to answer questions or speak to the committee. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on items. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, I will ask that members raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item, I ask that members ensure that their video is on and to raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you that you must submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at iec@toronto.ca to help with motions. If there are any other visiting members of council attending, we certainly have Councillor Carroll here live. I encourage you to turn. Oh, and Councillor Ainsley is. Oh, he's gone. Oh, there you are. And welcome, Councillor Ainsley. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. I encourage you to turn on your video so that I know that you are present and can give you the opportunity to ask questions of staff or speak. This will assist the clerk's staff to record attendance for the meeting. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. I do not see any. Next, we need a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on July the 9th, 2020, moved by Councillor Layton. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So let's run through the agenda. First item is 15.1, amendment to purchase order with AECOM Canada Limited for construction of the King Liberty Pedestrian Cyclist Bridge over the Metrolinx rail corridor. Would anyone like to hold this item? No?
I'll move the staff recommendations.
Oh, it's item 1. It is the King Liberty Pedestrian Cyclist Bridge. I don't know, Councillor Layton, is this in your ward? No? Okay. Councillor Cole has moved the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 2, amendment to non-competitive bridge contract with Seedon Traffic Control Services Limited for the provision of traffic control equipment. Would anyone like to hold this item?
Yes. Councillor Denzelman and Wong.
Okay.
James? Yeah.
Yeah, it's held in your name.
Thank you.
15.3, Sewers and Water Supply Bylaws, 2019 Compliance and Enforcement Annual Report. Anyone like to hold that? No? Councillor McKelvey, you'd like to move it? Moved by Councillor McKelvey. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now 15.4, I have a speaker. So I'll hold that. 15.5, impact of COVID-19 on waste collection and litter in green spaces and parks.
Can I hold for some questions?
Yes, Councillor McKelvey is holding that one. 15.5. 15.6, non-competitive bridge contracts for the provision of arboricultural services in the city of Toronto.
Does that mean cutting trees or?
Arborist, arboricultural. Would anyone like to hold that? No?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Cole. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item is 15.7, update on the school crossing guard program,
I'd like to
I'll
hold.
hold that.
held by Councillor Cole. Yep.
15.7, yeah.
15.8, request to study the environmental impact of two-stroke engine garden equipment.
Hold.
Deputy Mayor Minna Wong is holding that one. $15.9, improving Toronto's bike share program.
A hold,
There's a speaker for that item.
okay.
And 15.10, e-service line and warranties. There's also a speaker, so I'm going to hold that as well. Okay. Is there an added item? New business? New business is Councillor Cole's motion. Yes, so Councillor Cole is adding, Councillor Cole, you'd like to request the committee add a new item for consideration?
Yes, request to get the General Manager of Transportation to include as part of their 2021 update to the Cycling Network Plan 2019 Pandemic Cycling Network Expansion Response Plan, a temporary protected bike way along Yonge Street from St. Clair to Avenue Road. From St. Clair Avenue to Lawrence.
Right, and there are those amendments made already? Or no? Yeah, okay, so this is facing some amendments, but all those in favor in adding it to the agenda? Opposed? Okay, so that is added to the agenda, and we will deal with it in due time. So back to, are there any other new items? No other new items? With the will of the committee, we can adjust the agenda to accommodate speakers on the line. Is it okay if we go to 15.4, transition of the Blue Box program to extended producer responsibility?
Sorry, James, that could be a long one. Maybe we should clear some ones that are going to not take so long.
There's been a request to clear off some of the shorter ones. Okay, it could be a long one, extended. Okay, fair enough, that was a suggestion. Then we are at 15.2, amendment to non-competitive bridge contract with Seaton Traffic Control Services Limited for the provision of traffic control equipment.
I held that, James.
Yes, so Deputy Mayor Minna Wong, questions for staff?
I just want to, my first question is, please confirm what this work is for.
Good morning. Through the chair, this work was actually an amendment to a contract to enable the barricades and barriers that are being used for the Access TO major road closures. So as part of the closures of Lakeshore West, Lakeshore East, and Bayview, we've had to contract for a significant number of barricades, and Sedan is the contractor that we have on staff, and we've had to add to the capacity of that contract.
How much does it cost to put the barricades up?
So I'm going to look to either Antonio or Dave to get into the specific costs, but it's a combination of contracted services plus our own staff as well. So Dave, what's the total budget amount there? He's probably coming off mute, Councillor, sorry.
Is this done every weekend? Barricades up, barricades down?
Yeah, we put them up on Saturday morning early, like I think around 6 a.m., and they come down at Sunday evening for this. This has been happening since the beginning of the major road closure. So it's $80,000 per weekend for all the closures.
$80,000 per weekend.
Correct.
And where does that money come from?
It
Besides
comes
the
from our
taxpayer.
operating budget.
And do you have that money in your operating budget now?
Yep, we do, but we have spent, a fair amount of additional than that was planned, although it's still within the context of our budget.
Sorry, at the beginning of the budget cycle, did we approve this money to do these barricades?
These were emergent. I mean, we considered them to be emergency measures under COVID. That's what the program was developed to do.
So the money wasn't in the budget?
No, so they're COVID related.
Okay, so the money wasn't in the budget when we approved the budget back in January, February. Is that right? Is that right?
No, the money wasn't specifically defined for this particular use because we didn't anticipate this happening. Certainly, we have emergency dollars in our operating budget to deal with closures, but this was not anticipated. To your
So
point.
we burned through $80,000 per weekend. How many weekends are we doing this for?
We've done it since the beginning of this, I believe it was May 22nd, mid-May was the first time. So we've done it for half of May, June, July, August, and September. Next weekend will be the last one.
So what total amount?
Let me check here. The total amount is 2.194. Oh, no, sorry, that's a different one. Two different things. I think it's 2.194. I don't think I have the right number here. Give me 2 seconds and I'll get it for you, Councillor.
So it's $2 million we're spending that we don't have we don't have accounted for. We're going to have to find a way to pay for it, right? Is that fair?
The 2.19 million is the total amount of the Sedan contract over the including the existing contract. So we actually had savings in terms of school crossing guards for the 2020 season, since school crossing guards weren't being deployed when school was out of session. So we've been able to offset related to that in our operating budget.
How much is that?
Total amount, sorry, Chair, the total amount is $690,000 for the active TO locations, and then the ask for this committee meeting is for an additional $160,000, which will cover us to the end of the year, just in case we need it for some additional active TO closures.
Sorry, I just need clarification now because Ms. Gray said 2.1 and now Mr. Twaddle is saying 690. Can we confirm what that?
Yeah, 2.1 is the total amount of the Sedan contract, which goes beyond the active TO closures. So the total amount is, and Dave, it's 1.35 million, correct, for active TO closures?
Yes.
Okay.
$690,000. Mr. Twaddle, how much does it cost to put up and bring down the barricades in a weekend?
It's $80,000 for all three closures each weekend.
Okay, and how you said you're going to get that money from the school crossing guard program? Yes.
We've offset the issue through the school guard crossing savings of salaries and benefits. Yes, but not just that program.
Huh? Pardon?
So
not just that.
Not just that program. Yeah, we've worked within our.
Although I started the
budget.
timer late, Deputy Mayor, you're
Just trying to get a straight answer, Mr. Chair.
So largely from the school crossing guard program.
but not completely.
If there's additional operating costs, we likely would have pulled it either from our other tax-funded emergency programs within operating.
All right. I guess I'm done, James. I don't want to make you angry.
Oh, no, I don't get angry easily. I try and stay as calm as possible. So
I have some questions, Mr. Chair.
who was that? Oh, Councillor Layton?
Councillor Layton.
Okay, great.
And
Yes,
I'll
Councillor
be
Layton.
very brief, just to further to Councillor Min Wong's questions. Who would have authorized the closures of the roads during the emergency period? Like, whose permission would you need from the city to close the roads? Was this entirely your GM of transportation, or was it direction from the city manager or from the mayor?
Through the chair, within my delegated authority as general manager of transportation, I have the authority to close roads for, I believe it's up to 4 days. So for the weekends, it was under my delegated authority.
So where did did you receive instructions to do it, or was this just transportation's response to?
Well,
Was it, for example, was it discussed at the sort of control center that was leading our response to COVID? It was.
It was, and it's actually part of Active TO. So the conversations that we had via the during the first period of the emergency order, where we were engaged with the mayor, and whatever we brought back to the council was related to Active TO overall. There were 3 program streams. There was the quiet streets, there were the major road closures, and then there were the expansion of the cycling network. So it's all part of that same program.
So as general manager, you sat on the emergency response table, right? That met regularly.
Correct.
And discussed
pretty
that
regularly. Yeah.
I understand it was every day for a good portion of time.
Well, that's true. Perhaps I have blocked that out of my memory, but I think you're right.
Remember those days? Remember a couple months ago?
Seems like a long time.
Active TO, including the use of funds to close roads, was discussed at that table, and generally it was supported, correct?
That's correct. I will say that given the emergent issues related to COVID, we certainly were tracking that and encouraged to look for whatever offsets we could within our existing operating budget to cover it. But that's certainly when we come back, and we will be coming back with a report on all of the Active TO programs, we will certainly be discussing the budget and the implications and what that might look like if we choose to pursue this in future years.
But people knew there were costs at that emergency management table, correct?
Correct. In fact, we worked very closely to minimize those costs after the first weekend that we rolled them out. We thought the costs were quite high, so we shifted some of the costs to our existing staffing, and we also worked directly with police on managing the paid duty component.
So there weren't votes at that leadership table, correct? People didn't vote on items. It was we arrived at positions through consensus, correct?
Correct.
What politicians were on that table in those meetings? Are you able to tell me?
Certainly at strategic command, at the strategic command table. Oh, well, certainly the mayor, and I'm sure that I think that the deputy mayor was engaged in those discussions as well. And I really am trying to remember who else was at that table.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? No speakers on the item? Anyone want to move the recommendations? Councillor Cole is moving the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 4. Yeah, item number 4 is, we have a speaker, Emily Alfred from the Toronto Environmental Alliance. Do we have Ms. Alfred on the line? We do. Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Alfred, for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. It's very strange to do a deputation digitally. I'm sure you guys are all used to it by now, but it's a bit weird for me. So good morning, councillors. Thanks for hearing from me today. My name is Emily Alfred, and I'm the waste campaigner for the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T. T has more than 60,000 supporters across Toronto, and we've been working with residents, workers, businesses, and City Hall to build a greener city for all for over 30 years. T also works in coalition with environmental and health groups from across Ontario and Canada to promote zero waste. Today, I'm here to share an environmental perspective of the major changes coming to Ontario's Blue Box and recycling regulations, and to highlight serious concerns that we have about what this could mean for Toronto. First, I would like to say that the city staff report and outline of the city's interest and position on the provincial policy is well written and covers many of the same concerns that T and other environmental groups have. To summarize, as you have seen in the city staff report, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks is transforming Ontario's recycling regulations. This entails taking the obligation for residential Blue Box programs off municipalities and shifting Ontario's Blue Bin program to one fully paid for by manufacturers and producers of recyclable packaging. For many years, T and other environmental groups have been calling for this approach, also known as extended producer responsibility. If done right, extended producer responsibility regulations take the cost and burden off of increasingly complex recycling from municipalities. It holds companies accountable for their packaging and product design and makes them bear the cost of recycling and waste management. This gives them an incentive to redesign their products to reduce their waste collection and recycling costs. This is a major opportunity to fix the issues of recycling, waste, and litter in Ontario, and it could be a game-changing moment to shift Ontario towards a circular economy. However, we have serious concerns that the new packing regulations in Ontario may continue the waste and plastic problems we currently face and possibly send us backwards. We have reason to believe the new regulations will reduce access to good recycling services, leave out many residents, and increase the amount of unrecyclable plastic that the city has to manage as litter or as garbage. I'm going to highlight 3 concerns that we have specifically for the impact on Torontonians. So the province says that this regulation will eventually give all Ontario residents the same recycling service. However, it's important to know that residents in houses are treated very differently from those in multi-residential buildings. The regulation will require producers provide recycling service only to residents in houses and residents who live in multi-unit buildings that have city waste service as of August 2019. That means that hundreds of thousands of Toronto households, including ones that will be built in the next 5 years or that have just switched to city service, will not get the same province-wide recycling program that other Ontarians get. Considering the fact that half of Toronto households are in multi-residential buildings, this will have a big impact in Toronto. We urge you to make it clear to the province that all residents need to be treated equally in this new regulation. The province also says that litter is a priority. However, in this new regulation, producers won't cover public space recycling bins, and they won't face any consequences when their packaging ends up as litter. Toronto has nearly 20,000 recycling bins on public streets and in parks, and we're seeing a growing amount of single-use packaging litter in public spaces. As we know, that's another agenda item today at the committee. Recycling bins in public spaces and public buildings are an important part of giving consistent education and reinforcement of recycling rules. However, the companies that will take over recycling services from municipalities don't want to provide public space recycling, and under the proposed program, they won't pay for recycling their packages that end up as litter. We urge you to make it clear to the province that producers should provide public space recycling as a fundamental part of a comprehensive recycling program for Ontario. The new regulations are also meant to transform Ontario's recycling system and fix the stagnant diversion rate of only 60%. However, the regulation will hold producers to vague recycling targets that are similar or only marginally better than our current system, and then they won't be actually held to those targets until 2026. This means 5 more years of unrecyclable packaging ending up as litter in Toronto's garbage. It also means that even after 5 years, companies will only have to collect a portion of what they sell, and the rest that ends up in the environment or ends up in Toronto's landfill will still be paid for by the city. We urge you to make it clear to the province that producers should have to manage everything they put on the market, not just a small fraction. To summarize, the new package recycling regulation is meant to improve waste in Ontario, and if it if it will do that, it must include coverage for all residents and sources of recyclables. It must include all forms of packaging, and it must achieve higher waste diversion recycling rates. These are three issues that we're concerned about, and we know they're very important to Torontonians. We think it's important that Torontonians and councillors understand what's at risk if these key issues aren't addressed in the regulation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputant?
Yes, please. It's Councillor Layton here.
Councillor Layton?
Yes. Thank you very much, Emily, for your deputation. So to review just the points that you'd like us to hammer home is that single-family homes are treated differently than multi-unit residential, in that they won't be considered, if you're not on municipal collection, you would have the option to turn to municipal collection for several years, correct?
It's not quite clear. From my understanding, multi-residential buildings in Toronto that already receive City of Toronto service would get this new Blue Box program paid for by producers. But any building that has yet to be built, and we know there are a lot of new buildings growing up, popping up in Toronto right now, and any building that is currently on private service will not get this new producer-funded Blue Box program. And from what we understand, the idea is that after 2026, when the transition is complete, there may be an opportunity for them to join, but it's just not clear. And I just think that's a really long time for a lot of Torontonians to have to wait for good recycling.
There may be an opportunity to participate.
Yes, it's really not clear. We've seen some high-level proposals, but so far there's been about a year of discussion with municipalities, industries, and recyclers. But there's been no public consultation on this yet. There was a public discussion period that was meant to happen in the spring, but it got canceled. So, we're sort of guessing based on high-level thinking, but we haven't actually seen the rules yet.
So your second point was on litter in public spaces, in that they won't have to cover the producers won't have to cover the cost of recycling in parks, in public buildings. Now, right now, they pay the city for that, correct?
I think that would be a question for staff. I understand that municipalities provide Blue Box recycling as part of their, they provide it to houses. And I know in Toronto, there's a very comprehensive program that also offers recycling in public spaces and schools, in public buildings, to sort of show that consistency to residents. And it's an important part of increasing education and access to recycling. I know producers maybe pay for a portion of some of that. I'm not quite sure how it rolls out, but basically we think if you want to improve recycling in Ontario, you can't, cut down on what's already there, and you should be expanding access to recycling to all these locations.
So the point of EPR was to move the onus, the cost of recovery and disposal onto producers, in hopes that they would develop packaging and products that were either more readily recycled in a cheaper fashion, or they just made less, correct?
Yeah, the idea of producer responsibility is that, right now, a lot of municipalities are struggling to figure out what to recycle. Toronto's lucky, we're a big city, and there's a lot of, Toronto accepts a lot more in the Blue Box than in many other municipalities. But companies come up with new designs for packaging, new single-use products all the time, and they don't have to face any consequences for whether that package is recyclable or where it ends up. So producer responsibility makes them responsible for that end-of-life management of what they put on the market. And that means if they choose to use unrecyclable packaging or something that's really expensive to recycle, they have to pay the cost rather than the public and the environment.
But they also get to set what's on the list to be recovered, correct? They're allowed to change the list of what we put in the Blue Box.
Well, yeah, this is something that needs to be worked out. Our position is that it should cover all forms of packaging. So there isn't a distinction based on this type of material or that type of material, but if it's any type of packaging, whether it's currently recyclable or not, producers should have to be responsible for it. A concern that we have that I know was also raised in the staff report is that if producers are only held to criteria to collect a small portion of what they collect, or a very vague and broad category, they won't actually have to change their behavior. So one example is there's a category called flexible plastics. So this category of flexible plastics includes everything from regular plastic bags to those multi-layered stand-up pouches that are not easy to recycle at all or impossible to recycle. And so producers would have to only collect 30 or 40% of that. And that means that 60% of flexible plastics would still be in the environment, would still be in Toronto's garbage, and would not be collected. So that doesn't really give them an incentive to change their behavior and change that packaging unless that target's really high and they actually have to feel the pain of trying to collect that material and trying to recycle it. So we're concerned that, if you really want to incent this behavior change, you need really high targets and you have to hold them to collect everything.
Thank you very much. I notice my timer's not on, but I will give the benefit of the doubt to the chair that I have reached my time.
Yeah, no, you're almost right on time, I assure you. Oops. Great, thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Carroll. Sorry, questions for the deputant.
Thank you. Yes, I'm wondering if I could ask Emily, because I actually didn't pick up on the importance of this in the staff report. Are we to understand if the producers are exempt from litter, big producers like coffee shops, I hate to use a brand name, but Tim Hortons, to be blunt, all they would have to do is remove the garbage cans from around their properties and turn their product packaging into litter, and then they won't have to pay for it? Is that what we're potentially opening up to here?
Well, yeah, I guess on some level, the fact is that what we've heard will be in this regulation is that producers will only cover the cost of residential recycling. So that's blue boxes from single-family homes and a portion of multi-residential homes. So
and that would include takeout producers? It's any producer is exempt from any kind of litter?
Well, basically, even if there was a recycling bin near that Tim Hortons, they wouldn't have to cover the cost of that recycling. So this is why, we're concerned about this. I know city staff are concerned about this, and other municipalities have raised this issue too, that this new program will only cover a fraction of the waste in Ontario. And it's very confusing for the public to know that if you drop this, if you have this coffee at the shop, it's different recycling rules than what you have on the street in public litter bins. It's different from what you have at home, or if you go visit your friend who lives in a condo, maybe the recycling rules are different there. So the fact is that producers are trying to narrow the scope, or there's this real move to narrow the scope of what they have to cover the cost of, when really we want to expand the scope and make sure that producers have to cover all of the packaging that they put on the market.
Okay, I want to thank you for your deputation, because I think Matt did try to highlight this in the report, but you're putting it in real terms. Sort of, the penny dropped for me just this minute. So I'll follow up with questions to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Okay. Questions for staff? Councillor Peruzza. Councillor
Please add me to the
McKelvey.
list, James.
Councillor McKelvey, questions for staff?
Yes, thank you. What is the problem they wanted to fix?
Yeah, so
I don't know if somebody's muted, or maybe you can restart my time. Do we have staff?
Through the chair, Councillor McKelvey, what the regulation was trying to fix was a shift from partial responsibility right now, which we have 50% funded Blue Box program, to move to full operational and financial responsibility for the products. And why this puts producers in a better position is that they have control over the types of packaging that they put into the marketplace. And it's difficult for municipalities to keep up with the rapidly changing packaging that's being put into the market and continuously make capital investments in infrastructure to be able to recover those materials, as well as find sustainable markets for them to be put back into the circular economy.
Okay. And with this, Toronto has a very extensive program. Is it possible that less materials or types of materials could be recycled through this change?
Through the chair, as alluded through our guest speaker, it's difficult to know because really the future system, which would be the common collection system, which would be put in place post 2026, is that that common collection system will really set the stage for what the Blue Box program will be for the province of Ontario. That being said, through our ministry discussions, definitely there was the intention from the province and support from producers and municipalities that we want to see no backsliding in the system. So we definitely want to basically to put it in terms that Toronto has one of the most sophisticated systems in the province. We collect the widest breadth of materials, and we'd really like to see the rest of the province move up to be collecting that same suite of materials, which would be driving those economies of scale.
So we need to advocate hard that this goes to the highest common denominator, not the lowest. This is in place in BC. How is that working?
Again, through the chair, what we found is that there was a little bit of, I guess, maybe some learning curves in having the transition take place. So it was done not over the course of 3 years, but more rapidly. And in general, from most recently, what we've heard from municipalities is that the service that's being provided by producers is generating a good product for recyclable markets, so the stream is cleaner. However, it doesn't necessarily, again, extend to the same kind of system that we see in Ontario. So not as many multi-residential buildings are being captured in BC. We definitely have a different system in Ontario.
Okay, and I think I do see some merits for us, especially myself being on the border with Durham, who has different rules for recycling, and I know many people in Durham live, work, and there's this live, work, play border that's fluid between the two of us. So there is some benefit to having the same things recycled in the same ways in multiple places, especially with downtown core grows by however many hundreds of thousands in normal times per day. But what does this mean for, I think it's the parks, I'm very concerned by that piece, because we're already seeing right now during COVID that, there's increased litter in our parks and there's increased use of them. So there's those recycling bins, et cetera. So what does this mean? And we're advocating for that, but do you know if they're doing it in other places like in BC or why is there hesitancy to include this? What is the benefit to the province's plan to exclude parks?
Just through the chair, for our existing eligibility, parks are covered under the existing program if they are collected along a residential route. Right now, Toronto does not submit its costs for that service because we don't collect it along a residential route. However, we know that a pop can is a pop can no matter where you consume it. So if you are a residential household within Toronto or within the province, you choose to make your lunch and you decide to eat it outside that day, it doesn't make sense to have a system where if you decided to dispose of that or recycle it in a park rather than take it home, why would it be covered in one system and not the other? So I think in conversations with municipalities, we want to make this very clear and not confusing for residents. And that's a point where we think that any public space, even whether it be a library, a community center, there's no confusion for residents. So this is a key point. We've also corresponded with other municipalities, including York Region and Peel, in advocating for these types of places to also be added to the system.
Okay,
that was your last question.
Thank you for all your hard work on this file. I know.
Councillor McKelvey, that was your last question. Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? Yes, sorry, Councillor Carroll has been patiently waiting. She had some technical difficulties there, but I think they're resolved. So, Councillor Carroll, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, Annette. I'll have to take these off. So Annette, I'm wondering if we could go back to the deputant's concern about the litter program. In staff's view, is the issue here that they're doing the residential blue box program first in a focus, and there is litter program, producer responsibility legislation coming, and there's a worrying lag here? Or do we think that perhaps the province has been lobbied in such a way that we really are looking at producers winning this round and reducing their commitment that they made a few years ago to take 100% responsibility for their packaging?
Through the chair, Councillor Carroll, basically by removing the eligibility of the parks right now, it's actually a backslide because that is something that's allowed right now. So if parks and street side litter bins are collected along residential routes, that's actually part of the program. So we obviously want to see that be extended to where you might have an operation that has a dedicated collection service. But that's why it's such a concern that it doesn't even take along the existing system. So even that one major program change is of concern. And there's other eligible sources as well, such as schools, long-term care facilities. Right now in the Blue Box program, again, if those are collected along residential routes, they're eligible to have partial funding. We'd like to see those included in the future system as well. And those are just elements that we just don't know what will be forthcoming in the regs, but we've already seen a bit of a hesitation or backslide, at least on the public space.
So, and I wasn't focused on this as much when I was reading the report. The comment in your report that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck is at the bottom of page 8, limiting producer reporting and target setting to a few broad material categories reduces the visibility of poor performing materials and gives them a free ride on those materials which are achieving high diversion rates. It also removes any incentive for producers to improve the recyclability of these materials. And that's what's at the heart of this, isn't it? It would appear that the legislation, unless you can negotiate something as fundamental as the focus in this report, the focus is now on specifics and where we're going to target, as opposed to trying to achieve producers are 100% responsible for the impact of their packaging on the environment. That's not the focus anymore, is it? The focus is on what things will we zero in on, and those are the things we'll ask producers to do. We don't. It sounds like this legislation doesn't have a goal of 100% responsibility anymore. Am I reading that right?
Through the chair, I would say that in our conversations with the province and the working groups, we found that they are trying to make this a very much an outcomes-based regulation that gives producers the flexibility to achieve those outcomes. In part of those high-level categories, they believe that that will give the ability to do that. In our position paper as a city, we've put forward that in our experience in managing the largest Blue Box program in the country, having the visibility on more subcategory reporting allows us to better understand how we can promote and educate on materials that are not being effectively captured or that might be problematic in the system. And what we're offering there is that having that feedback loop to know that these are materials that are either more expensive to recycle because of their product design or they're being poorly captured will allow the producers to be able to manage their outcomes more effectively. So at those high-level categories, you really can't see that level of detail, and it doesn't really give the province necessarily the feedback that they need should they need to strengthen regulations in the future or increase targets. So the province has assured us that they are looking at very progressive targets. They do want it to be a best-in-class system. However, we still have the concern that broad level category reporting will not allow that to actually be the case once the regulations are presented.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. That was your last question. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Layton? Yes, Councillor
Yes,
Late.
please. Thank you very much, Councillor Pasternak. So if I'm to understand correctly, from what we know, what's not covered by this extended producer responsibility program is commercial collection, city facilities, charities, parks, and other street litter bins, correct? Sorry. And multi-unit residential that is not currently collected by the city.
Through the chair, it is our understanding that, yes, for multi-residential locations that are not city serviced, they would not be part of the additional transition, or sorry, the preliminary transition, but they would be able to come on to service as requested in 2026 once producers assume the full system for the province. For the other eligible or the other sources that you mentioned, it's our understanding is that it's unlikely that they will be included. However, we believe that schools at this point in time and long-term care facilities may be, but until we see the draft regulations, we're not sure. So
the premise upon which EPR is based is that the costs for disposal, collection and disposal are put back onto the producers, and thus giving them an incentive to make it easier to recycle or just use less material, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So while our residential routes are covered for the most part, the commercial would still have to pay the city's portion of collection and disposal for all of those recycled goods, correct, or recyclable goods, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that would be correct.
So let's get this clear. While residential, how many residential customers are there, and how many commercial customers are there?
Through the chair, I think we have close to 900,000 residential customers now, and I believe commercial customers, I'll just have to get back to you on that number, but several thousand, I believe.
So while the cost may be adjusted, and we don't know what it is for the residential customers, it won't be for the commercial. So really the cost of disposing of all of that waste that comes from the producers will continue to be borne by the commercial sector.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Now also, anything that's recyclable that ends up in our residual waste stream, it ends up in our waste stream, won't be covered any longer, correct? We won't get funding from the producers to help manage their packaging that ends up in our garbage stream.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. That's been a point that we've also very strongly advocated for. So we do single-family audits and multi-residential audits frequently. So we are able to estimate the amount of producer packaging that's still remaining in those streams.
So there will be an incentive for these extended producer responsibility groups or these product groups to actually encourage people to put recyclable material into the garbage stream because they won't have to pay for them, correct? Maybe that's an assumption on my part, but
I would hope that would not be the case. I would hope that the incentives would be on the targets that producers have to achieve, and the penalties are strong enough that if they don't achieve that there's an incentive enough to be able to capture those materials rather than pay the penalty or not meet a target that actually has the outcome of removing those products from landfill to disposal.
But are those targets any better now than they were prior? Are any better proposed than they are currently?
Again, we have to wait to see when they have the draft regulations on what the targets will be. But we definitely have an understanding of what those are right now, and we'll be able to provide that comment back once we see the draft regulations.
Conceivably, could we have more than one blue bin?
Through the chair, once producers take over the common collection system, that has to be approved by the Resource Productivity and Recovery Association. There could be a possibility that they provide the service in a way that's different than Toronto does today. So for example, that could look like It could be a dual stream service, so they could switch to fibers, or they could potentially remove certain items if they could demonstrate that their recovery was sufficient enough to meet target.
That was your last question, Councillor Layton.
Okay, thank you.
And just through the chair, I got an update on commercial customers. It's about 6,000 customers.
6,000 commercial. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As much as we hurry through our virtual council sessions, I hope that this is a change that is picked up by all of the members of council and becomes a topic of discussion in local communities across the city. I'm not a member of the committee. I can't move a motion, but my hope is that the undertaking of staff is to negotiate aggressively on this, less politely and more aggressively, that what's being contemplated here, whether or not that's intention, whether or not at the end of the phase-in there is to be further legislation, this new direction has not really worked out to the extended producer responsibility that we envisioned if we go back as far as 2015, 2016, when we were moving from Waste Diversion Ontario to new goals and the possibility that we would really make producers of packaging 100% responsible for that packaging's impact on the environment, so that we would end up with a new type of producer responsibility that really drove them to change their packaging. And that's an investment, that's cost money, heaven knows, but it's absolutely essential that we do that. We live in a city that produces something like 1 million coffee cups a month. I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's staggering. And I'm one of its worst offenders because I'm forever leaving my reusable cup in the car and coming upstairs. And so we have a lot of work to do here, but we rely on the producers to drive it. And if we present a legislation that says unless you leave the packaging on the table inside their establishment, they're not going to worry about it, it could have devastating consequences on the progress we've already made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you. I beg that if there are any other speakers, I'm working on a motion, which I can hold off for council if that's it's a bit rushed, so maybe that's what I'll do, and I'll just speak instead.
Do you have it?
I think we've got ourselves in a bit of a problem here, because extended producer responsibility was to hold companies accountable and give them an incentive to reduce or redesign their products or packages that they create and that end up in the waste stream. That was the purpose of it. I think all of us can agree that that's actually a pretty good thing. Saving resources by giving an incentive to produce less waste, also a problem of municipalities across around the world, but in Ontario with respect to this debate. But I think what's come forward is that there's been a rush to say, just put it in the hands of the producers because they'll be able to manage it. But also at the same time, advocacy on behalf of those producers to say, well, you can't go too strict because it'll be too expensive. We can't manage it then. And I think the regulations, at least our worst fears of what's going to be proposed, is that they've lost sight of the initial goal here and rather have tried to just make it easier on producers of packaging rather than maintain the intent of extended producer responsibility and the intent of our recycling program, at least as we've seen it as a city, which is to try to make it as easy as possible for residents of Toronto. We have our Waste Wizard. We moved to one bin. That was expensive tools to build, albeit the one bin probably more expensive than the Waste Wizard. But we've taken great steps and care in becoming I think a Canadian leader in that respect, about trying to make it easy and accessible for everyone. We haven't quite got there on multi-unit residential yet. The recycling rates are still low. But if we're not in the driver's seat there, if we're not the ones pushing, and instead it's the private sector that creates the waste and has to pay for it, I think we've led ourselves to a point that we're not going to achieve the very basic outcome we wanted to as a result of extended producer responsibility. And that is that we have used less resources and are able to reclaim more resources. So I think at its core, we've got a problem there. And I think we need to make a big, bold statement to the province that unless you get that right, the whole thing is wrong. We need to make that statement. That was the motion I was working on. We can't comment on this in a couple of weeks. If the regs get posted and within a couple of, or a month and a half, 2 months, we've got to have a solid position, that's going to make it immensely hard for us to determine whether or not this actually benefits the residents of the City of Toronto financially or from a service point of view. That's a problem. The other side, which was mentioned by our speaker, it's not equitable the way this is working so far. We've got houses covered, but not our MERB sector entirely. We've got public spaces not covered. We're hanging the commercial side of things out to dry. You got to tell me that extended producer responsibility shouldn't cover food courts. Like right now, food courts may be struggling, but those clamshells are going to start. Those foam clamshells are going to start ending up back in those waste bins before you know it. And if we're not covering those things, then the very basic premise, we're missing the very basic premise of all of this. The final one is, which I fear, is our world-renowned deposit return system for beer bottles. And now it's taken on other alcoholic beverages bottles as well. We should be looking at expanding that as part of extended producer responsibility, not looking at dialing it back.
Councillor Layton, if you could just wrap up, you're almost at the 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. The timer doesn't say that for me. So my apologies. I'll leave it. I'll leave it right there. But I will tell you that you should expect a motion at council along those lines, and I will attempt to get it to everyone prior.
Well, we look forward to your exciting motion at council, and I'm sure it will trigger emotions. Any other speakers on this item? No? Okay. No more speakers? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
if I could beg your indulgence just for a second on a point of order, is it possible to send this to council without recommendation? Would the committee entertain that? Just so that we don't put our stamp on it as a committee until we've had a chance to.
It's fine. Yeah, I
to
mean,
tweak it
I
in
don't
such
see
a way.
I don't see a problem. We'll just send the whole report up. It needs, yeah. So the clerk will quickly type up a motion. I mean, I'm a little reluctant only because that means we had no opinion on this. And council does look to its committee system for guidance. It's almost like we couldn't decide what to do. Are you sure you want to do that?
I'm just not comfortable sending a report to council that our first recommendation is we want to be first in line for this. Like, I have serious problems with this. I think I voiced it all now. But our first recommendation is that we want to be first in line July 1st, 2023. Now, I get why they want to do it. I understand it, or why the recommendation is coming from staff. But I'm not comfortable with so many unknowns that we're simply sending that as our first recommendation. I suppose, though, we could, I will move something to change it at council. And I just wanted to make that point, if we sent it without recommendations, that there are some shortcomings here, but given the time that we had to see this and debate this, it was limited. But I'll take your lead, and I'm not gonna. I won't make a fuss.
All right, well, just a second. Councillor Carroll, I think, had a point of order?
Yeah, can I,
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cole had a point of order, and if you want to chime in, we can.
well, I was simply going to say that the more conventional route for members of the committee in a situation like this, the recommendation is to grant an authority to staff. And if you wanted to send a message to council that you're not ready to grant authority, if you were to simply vote the report down, then the chair's message, should he be asked to give a message to the media or whatever, is that we're simply not ready to grant authority. We have some further motions we will bring to council. And then that message is clear, whereas without recommendation is a little murky.
All right, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Should we defer this to the next Infrastructure and Environment Committee? Give us.
No.
Can I?
No.
I had a point of
I
order.
don't
too.
like that idea. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, just as an appendage to Councillor Carroll's comment, I think we should just hold this down to the end of the meeting and incorporate what Councillor Carroll added to what Councillor Layton has commented, and let's craft a addendum to the motion going to council with those comments by Councillor Layton and Councillor Carroll. So let's hold it down to the end. That's my.
Will of the committee to hold it
I
down?
see the merit in that, but I feel like, I think what Councillor Layton wants to do is very important, and I'd rather we really took the time to see how we can strengthen our position on this. And so I'm comfortable to let this go through to council and amend it there, if that solves those technical issues, but I certainly don't want to defer it. And I'd rather we took some time over the next couple of weeks to really craft something we're all happy with, to send a strong message to the province about our concerns.
Okay, we have, yeah, so let's send it up to council without recommendation. Seems to be the compromise here. Am I reading committee correctly?
No, you're not.
I'm not reading committee correctly.
You know, again, I've asked again, Councillor Layton, I think, mentioned a couple of his reservations. Let's hold this down till we can include the recommendation to council along, whether we want to delay it or whatever it is, but go to council with those two admonitions by Councillor Layton. That's what I thought we could do to get this going to council without just no opinion or with rejection. So, that's what I move.
All right, look, we'll hold the item down. If you guys can come up with something between now and when this item pops back up again in about an hour, we can work with it. Councillor Cole, it was your idea, so I assume you'll be working on that vigorously. Councillor Layton, I understand you have some direction to council, at least things to think about. Is that a correct?
Yeah, I think so.
assumption?
I think that's what Councillor Layton was trying to get at.
Okay, no, fair enough. Let's hold the item down and let's go on to 15. Sorry, 15.5. I don't have any speakers on 15.5. Councillor McKelvey has held this down. Impact of COVID-19 on waste collection and litter in green spaces and parks. Councillor McKelvey, questions of staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We put up the fines for the litter. Were any fines issued for littering?
Hi, can folks hear me? Janie here, through the chair to Councillor McKelvey. I don't have the data on the number of fines that were issued. I'd have to specifically enroll that information from Municipal Licensing and Standards, who would be the ones who would have levied any of the fines. I know that through some of the discussions, some of the difficulties in laying fines around litter is that you actually have to witness the littering happening from the individual. Whereas what we end up with is generally what happens after the litter, which is picking up the litter. But I can follow up with MLS and see specifically how many fines were issued around littering.
Was there a reduction in litter after the signs went up? Were they effective? I mean, residents really liked them. They were happy that we did them, but did they actually do what we hoped they would accomplish?
I mean, I'll ask Mr. Kelleher to comment as well. I think our experience, and Donna can add in as well, is that the signs did have an impact, certainly on the behavior of people, and did influence them either taking litter with them and not sort of stockpiling them around what could have been sort of full litter containers. But I'll ask Matt to comment further on that.
Okay.
Councillor-
He's not. Yeah.
Can you hear me, councillors?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we did actually notice a slight decrease in the amount of litter with the signs that were put up in conjunction with our team at solid waste and also with parks. A lot of the communications has been, stop just putting the materials wherever you think is convenient, and please use the bin. That's what it's there for. And our teams have been working quite collaboratively to make sure that we pick up litter as fast as we possibly can.
Okay, I have 4 questions, so I'll try and get through these quickly. Do we see during this time, like there's the increased use in the parks, but in addition, for example, you can't refill your own portable mug at Tim Hortons or Starbucks or anywhere anymore. So is there increased litter also associated with just an increase in general across single-use items across the city? Like, are we seeing that trend writ large?
I think there's just there is a trend in increased single-use items being used for sure, and it's due to the convenience and, of course, the COVID impact. The amount of that material increase, we're currently doing some audits, and we'll continue to do those over the next few months on our litter and what's actually in it to really identify the amount of single-use items versus regular items, and we can get back to council and committee with a report once we have some empirical data on that.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned in the report that there's cross-contamination of the recycling, and that ended up in it all going to garbage. That makes the discussion we just had on the last item a little bit moot if all the stuff in parks that should be recycled isn't getting recycled anyway. So is this different than normal years, and how are we going to fix this problem?
So, councillors, to be honest and frank, the materials that are put in the recycling bin in our parks and along our streets is highly contaminated, and it's been highly contaminated for years. And that's one of the challenges with the accessibility of the blue bin right beside the black bin, and people coming into the communities from neighboring municipalities where rules are different. And also, unfortunately, some people just not caring where the materials go. So what we've been seeing is a trend in the blue bin that more of that material is becoming non-recyclable to the point where most of the material is moved to the garbage stream. Now, we do look at the bins and we do have processes in place to recycle those materials, but at this point in time, the contamination rate is just so high that it's virtually garbage. What we are looking to do in this year's budget is actually look to have a pilot project at a number of the major parks and green spaces where we will actually look to decrease the number of blue bins and increase the number of black bins, and also promote more of our green bins. And our hope is that with more black bins available, they will be used as garbage, and the blue bins will have a better quality of recyclable material that can be recycled. And then hopefully we can work with the industry and the producers to wrap those costs into extended producer responsibility.
Yeah, so we have to sort that out before EPR. Okay, last 2 questions. I'll put them together and let you finish. What support can we get for community
Councillor
cleanup? They're
McKelvey.
doing it anyway, and are we participating in the October 19th cleanup with the province?
Last question.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, we are participating in the October cleanup with the province, and we work very closely with the Energy and Environment Group on community cleanups, and we're here to help out in any way, shape, or form to ensure that litter is picked up in a safe way, and we can help manage that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other questions for staff before I ask a few? No? No visiting councillors, committee members? No? Just a couple of quick questions to staff. The ravine strategy was the ravine cleanup strategy. Was that 100% put on hold for this year when COVID struck because we'd adopted a plan to go into our ravines and do a massive cleanup program?
Through the chair, the program was not put on hold. It unfortunately started later than it should have, just because of some of the COVID response that we were doing in other areas. But the program continues now with the crews actively involved in some of the ravine cleanup even now up until about November.
So when it comes to park signage about littering bylaws and the fines related to them, one of the common concerns I have is there isn't enough signage. Now, people really don't like a lot of signs in their parks, but are we deploying enough public notices to let them know that littering triggers a fine? It's against bylaw.
So through the chair, and Matt can comment as well, we have increased the amount of signage this summer, specifically in parks, because of the litter problems that we've been having. All of the bins in the parks are signed accordingly with the sort of rules around what's supposed to go in each bin. There's a lot of signage in parks, so we, obviously are very cautious about over-signing, wherever we can. But what we have done this summer in response is put additional signage up in areas that we know it's needed, rather than just right across the board. So you'll see, in some of the problem areas, we did increase the signage quite substantially.
Do we staff up on Monday mornings in parks because of weekend usage? Do we up our staff complement for Monday morning cleanup, or that's not really?
Through the chair, we don't initially, up our staff complement on, it's a pretty standard sort of staff complement across the board, although a little bit different on weekends. But we do on early in the morning ensure that our crews are focused on the problem areas with litter, so that they're going and picking up that litter along with the solid waste program that Matthew was talking about collaboratively this summer. So we refocus crews early in their shifts so that they can get to the problem areas around litter and then redistribute them to some of their regular duties.
Now with the bins, we can put out more bins, but unless they're cleared out on a timely basis, we run into situations of animals and bees and whatever, especially if they're placed. It becomes a big problem if they're placed close to play sets. Is sort of a massive bin deployment really the way to go on this, or more regular collection, or a balance of both?
So through the chair, I'm going to ask Matthew. There you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, it's really a balance of both in terms of the bins and bin placement. And one of the pieces of work that we'll be rolling out next year is really looking at the number of bins where they're at in the major parks and green spaces, and looking at augmenting the number of blue bins to black bins, and possibly adjusting down the number of blue bins to get the black bins a little bit more prevalent in maybe some of the other areas where we've seen historically increases of litter. But our crews are at the parks and the beaches at 5 o'clock in the morning, emptying the receptacles, and we work throughout the day and do spot checks to make sure that the bins are not overflowing. The other challenge too with the bins themselves is when residents and visitors go have their picnics and lunches, and they end up with a big black garbage bag. Sometimes they don't put them inside the bins, and they leave them beside the bins. And that's where we tend to see some challenges with potential rodents or bees buzzing around those. So we're really actively promoting the use of the black bins for garbage, of course, and the blue bins for recycling, and looking at how we can strategically deploy them throughout all of our parks in partnership with our other divisions to get less litter on the ground and have it into bins.
Okay. Great, thank you very much. Those are all my questions. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor McKelvey, you have the item down. You don't have to, but.
No, I just want to thank staff. I know that we were overwhelmed in May with the volume in the parks, and they really did step it up. I've had many, many less complaints that have come in from our community members since they've increased the number of bins. They put out the signs. They've been very responsive to when we've been calling in problem areas. But clearly we have a lot of work to do. And especially with the public, so that they're separating out their recyclables and their garbage appropriately. I'm really disappointed to hear that most of our recycling bins have so much contamination in them that we can't recycle those materials. So I think we've made some good strides on this over the last couple of months, but we all, the public, the city, everyone needs to work together so that we can keep these parks clean. So thank you to both the residents for advocating for the community cleanups they're doing, and to staff.
Hello.
Great, thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other speakers before I share a few words? Councillor Layton? No? So yes, I just wanted to echo the thanks to staff for this important update. We all know that parks are very precious to our various neighborhoods across the city. I think we have a little over 1,500 of them, and people like to see their parks in good shape. They like to see them clean, and our operations staff are under difficult pressures during this time to make sure that happens. I mean, word getting out is people are safer in parks, and we want people to use their parks, and but we also want to make sure they're clean, because if we pick the garbage up on a timely basis, the litter load actually decreases. Because I'm a believer in the broken window theory. If people see garbage kind of piled up in a spot, they'll continue to throw their garbage on there, thinking that is the policy and the process for getting garbage picked up. I'd like to just personally thank a few people in York Center, Ward 6, Joe Way, Dennis D'Amato has done a great job in parks operations under difficult circumstances. And on the capital side, Mary Opecchia and Joe Ferrara, who also work with other North York councillors. So with that, I hope the remaining days of summer and fall are nice, so we can get out and enjoy our parks. And I think we've sent a message to staff that clean parks are the best parks. And I once again thank them for their work on this file. So we have a motion to receive. Councillor McKelvey is moving receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Yeah, so Councillor Cole, I've got School Guard program is number 7. I don't have any deputants.
I just had questions to staff.
Okay, Councillor Cole, questions to staff?
Just in jogging around the city and driving around the city, including my ward, it's great to see all the crossing guards out. And I think it really is a critical investment. The thing that I wonder about is in some locations, like even in my ward, I know that the school that used to be there is closed and it's now townhouses, yet we still have a crossing guard. So I'd like to know whether we do any counts of how many people, do they keep a record of how many children that they cross on a daily basis? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor. So actually, this is one of the recommendations of our report. As you're aware, this is the first year that we basically adopted the program from Toronto Police Service, and we essentially took on the program verbatim in terms of the existing locations they had provided staff. In this report, though, we are recommending to go back and revisit those existing 704 locations that we inherited to see, number one, first and foremost, whether or not there's an opportunity to eliminate the lunch schedule if there's a very low volume of children crossing at lunchtime. Or again, hopefully trying to find locations like the one you mentioned there, whereby maybe a school's closed, there may be changes in the neighborhood that may trigger the kind of reverse warrant to basically have that guard removed.
But you didn't answer my question. Do they count the number of children or human beings that they cross every day?
Through the chair, so yeah, that is part of the warrant process. We basically have this gap analysis warrant process. It's a new warrant process that we just started that came down from the Ontario Traffic Council that looks at the number of pedestrians crossing at a location. It also looks at the volume of traffic and basically it tries to determine the degree to which conflicts occur between pedestrians and vehicles at the various intersections, and then looks again set thresholds to basically make the establishment as to whether or not the crossing guard is warranted.
Again,
Councillor Cole, just to add to that, the guards themselves do not keep a tallied count every day of who's crossing at that intersection. So in order for us to have some information and data related to that, that's why we go in and do this warrant analysis.
So they don't count?
They do not. They're there to cross safely, to cross the people there safely. So we would come in and observe and send staff out to observe and do those counts in the locations where we believe the guards may not have met the warrant.
Well, I just, don't you think this would be essential part of the analysis of how necessary certain locations are and others are not? I mean, they could do it electronically, put a counter in their hand. In some locations, it's rare that you see anybody cross. So it's not as if we're putting undue onus on the guards to do this challenging bookkeeping. Why wouldn't we ask them to take account of how many individual residents that they cross every day? Why not do it?
So there's, I'll let Roger get into the details on this, but there's differences on a daily basis and over different times of the year with regard to the usage. So when we do our warrant analysis, we actually do it at a specific time of the year so that we can capture the sort of most conservative estimate. And it is more effective for us to be able to consistently track the number. So while we could potentially give the guards a clicker to be able to identify the number of people, depending on the situation, they may or may not be able to be as diligent about that as we could if we were doing an observation. So I don't know if Roger has anything else to add about that.
Yeah, exactly.
I still don't understand why you don't have the simple data that you record every day, how many people that have crossed that intersection, and that be given as part of the warrant analysis. I mean, it just befuddles me why this can't be done.
Yeah, through the chair, just to add to Barbara's comment, I mean, there's really a couple things here. One, in terms of consistency and when we do the counts, but more importantly, there are locations where, as you say, maybe there's less children there, so there's more of an opportunity to be counting. But there's also a lot of locations where there's very heavy pedestrian traffic, and we really do want the crossing guards themselves to focus on the location and helping the kids cross the street safely rather than the count itself. Not to mention, too, again, to have the crossing guards, I mean, we try to do these counts with independent consultants, independent contractors, so that there isn't any sort of bias with respect to the data that's collected as well, too. It's a little bit self-serving.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coole. Any other questions for staff? Oh, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you. So I understand the report directs us to begin to evaluate the inherited sites. those that moved over from the police services. So, and that may be one of the sites that Councillor Cole witnessed. And so doing those counts is really essential. But I'm wondering, you're also recommending adding sites. And I'm wondering if you have developed a rigorous set of criteria in terms of adding sites. We know that the police service had a set of criteria, but it was also very much budget driven, because they said you can have as many crossing guards as you're willing to fund us for, and so there was always that tension. Are we confident that we've developed our own, now that it's under the city's auspice, have we developed our own set of rigorous criteria to make sure that everyone we add is absolutely warranted?
So through the chair, we actually have done that. And in fact, it was a critical piece of us taking on the program. And it was timely because the province, I believe the Ontario Traffic Council had just released provincial-wide standards for crossing guard assessment. And so we adopted that warrant, which is, I would argue, more thorough and comprehensive than the warrant that was being used previously. The one thing we were not able to do in the many tasks that were required to get the program up and running was to do the warrant assessment on existing locations, as well as some that were in the queue, so sort of legacy locations that came from the police services over to us before a guard had been established. And so what we're proposing in this report is to go back to all 704 existing locations and run them through the same warrant analysis that we are now doing on the go forward to identify whether they still need to be there, whether they should be moved in case a school has moved or a scenario has changed, and as Roger mentioned in the report articulates, whether the lunch shift is still necessary.
Yes,
and
yes.
If you have more questions about the warrant process, Roger can fill you in. I believe we articulated it in the initial report we brought to council last year.
No, I'd like to move on to the topic of what if you find some are no longer warranted. Even if they are no longer warranted, the removal of a crossing guard is always very controversial in the community. So, pardon the pun, but it seems to me that if that is the case, there's an intersection between Vision Zero and this evaluation. If you find that there's an area where you have to propose removal of a crossing guard because it's no longer warranted, is it possible to give the community some assurance by saying, but we will prioritize this particular street network, whatever the streets are that come to that intersection, for the Vision Zero reduction to 30K? So that we can say to people that crossing guards are but one of many measures to keep children safe, and if we're removing one, we can prioritize another. Is that possible? You know, I'm imagining that removal is only going to be recommended in a handful of cases, so it wouldn't upend Vision Zero to prioritize a few here.
Through the chair, Councillor Carroll, you're exactly right. We believe very strongly that crossing guards are a very important tool, but they're only one tool in the Vision Zero safety toolkit. And in certain scenarios, people have identified issues at an intersection that we believe could be reviewed and satisfied with other tools, whether it be additional signalization, whether it's changing the duration of time on the crossing, additional lighting, maybe changes or modifications to the sidewalk network. There's a number of different things that we can do, and we would want to prioritize that. I also think we have the opportunity, and we would want to talk about this a little bit, to shift those guards that no longer meet the warrant within the same ward, so that clearly, unless the school has closed down, if it's moved or there's some other situation, perhaps we can manage it that way by shifting the resource within the same ward.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other questions for staff? Yes, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yeah, what's the warrants? How many people have to cross over what period of time to justify a crossing guard?
Yeah, through the chair. So the warrant process, as Barbara mentioned, is a new process that was established by the Ontario Traffic Council back in 2017. It's referred to as the index exposure method. So essentially what it does is it looks at the number of pedestrians crossing at the intersection. It looks at the number of vehicles that are crossing and basically looks for conflicts. But then what it does is it actually checks against a hysteresis for that particular type of intersection as well. So it's kind of like what would you expect to see in terms of potential pedestrian and cyclist conflicts at an intersection? And then essentially what you do is you plot on a graph in terms of a threshold to sort of say, for this particular type of intersection, in terms of the size and cross-section of it, what you would expect in terms of pedestrian volumes, vehicle volumes, the sort of conflicts that would be deemed acceptable versus exceeding the threshold that would actually trigger the warrant for a school crossing guard. So I guess long and short is it's much more complicated than just a single threshold. The threshold is actually a performance curve.
And is that information posted up on our website? Because I was looking, it wasn't apparent that outline telling. I mean, if residents want a crossing guard, they should be given some level of information beforehand so that they understand the things that need to be satisfied and that there are some objective criteria. You just don't ask for one and get one.
Yeah, through the chair, I absolutely agree with that. I think we may have sort of a vague description on the website, but I think it's worthwhile for us to revisit that and maybe put some additional information, just so people have a better understanding of how rigorous the new process is.
And we're adding 30 additional locations. Is that right?
Through the chair, that is correct.
That's the proposal to add 30 additional locations.
And what's the cost on that? $320,000?
No. So through the chair, to add those additional 30 locations would be an additional $927,000 per year.
Wow. And how much do the schools chip in on that?
Through the chair, they do not chip in. They don't contribute to that cost at all.
Oh. Okay. So 30, and they've all been examined to qualify for this warrant system?
Through the chair, that's correct. We adopted that new warrant system that was implemented. We established the thresholds that are unique to the city. And so, yeah, these 30 locations were actually vetted using that new approach.
And have you measured how many accidents you've avoided by using these crossing guards?
Through the chair, at this point in time, no, we haven't actually done that exercise. I think the bigger focus was just in adopting the program from Toronto Police and taking on the full burden of the program last year. But that's certainly something we could look at in the future.
How many accidents have we had around schools?
Through the chair, going back a couple of years ago, 2017, there was actually 2 fatalities. And I think the year before that, there was a single fatality. There's, in terms of serious injuries, the numbers are fairly low from my recollection, but I think we'd have to look back at the data to kind of see.
And is there any evidence to suggest that if there had been crossing guards, any of those accidents could have been avoided?
Through the chair, I mean, the reality is, as one of the many tools in the Vision Zero road safety plan, the idea of having the crossing guard there, making the crossings a lot more conspicuous, and quite frankly, even having the guards there and motorists driving around and seeing the presence of the guard, sort of just serves as a bit of a reminder to everybody that it's that time of year again, and there's a lot of children and parents walking around the neighborhood and heading for school, right? So,
but there's no evidence to, like, I just respectfully, you didn't really answer my question. So
there's no numerical evidence, no statistical correlation evidence like that we've actually undertaken.
And there's been no sort of discourse by the Toronto Police Service, as an example, that would have said if there was a crossing guard here, there would not have been an accident.
Not specifically.
Yeah, through the chair, not specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wong. Any other questions for staff? I just have a couple of quick ones. No? Just bringing to your attention number 3 item that we're voting on, committee members. we're providing $320,000 per year to both school boards. I don't know, I thought there were 4 school boards in Toronto, to fund existing school travel planning programs. Now, do we send criteria for that to the school boards on how that can be spent, or it's discretionary upon the recipient?
So through the chair, so the school boards have their existing school travel planning program. Actually, maybe if I can go back, this goes back to the motion that was raised when we presented the report back in June of last year about the need for us to work closely with the school boards in terms of the drop-off and pickup zones. So when we consulted with the school boards, we felt that the best way to expedite that effort of looking about the issues around the drop-off and pickup zones was to basically leverage their existing school travel planning work that's been going on, where they prioritize schools where they feel there's a need. And they've got a regimented program where they go about investigating not just the drop-off and pickup zones, but the actual walk-in to school for most of the pedestrians. And then from there, we can build on that to make whatever improvements we need, whether it's at the frontages of the school in terms of drop-off or pickup, or with respect to the actual route to school itself. So yes, it is a very rigorous program.
So is this capital or operating, or it's at the discretion of the school boards?
It's operating dollars, Councillor, and it is actually aligned with the Vision Zero Road Safety Plan education program.
So if it's operating, are they hiring staff members or giving an honorarium to parents, or what would be a common way that these monies are being spent?
Yeah, so through the chair, what the school boards have done is they've basically retained the support of Green Communities Canada, where they have a lot of expertise when it comes to the sort of public consultation process. And yeah, they involve the principal, some of the teachers, they involve parents within the schools. Certainly my staff and traffic operations are involved in that exercise as well too. And again, on the go forward, especially now that we're proposing to put City of Toronto money towards this as well, we want to take a little bit more control in terms of making sure that we're involved, and as likewise the local council as well.
So if they wanted to spend these funds on pylons or reflective vests or honorarium to volunteers to help direct traffic and make sure kids are dropped off and picked up safely, those would be acceptable expenses, or we don't audit, and we hope it's spent wisely.
Yeah, through the chair, my understanding is those funds are specifically for the consultant support to undertake the study and investigations. Any sort of improvements above and beyond that would be additional costs.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Any other questions from committee? No? Speakers? Councillor Cole.
Yes, I'm preparing a motion to this report.
Councillor Cole, your motion is not quite ready.
Okay, anyways, I'm going to just speak to it and then we'll...
Okay.
Okay, anybody else want to speak? Go ahead.
Okay, well, we need some filler. So, Councillor Carroll, please.
Happy to be the filler.
I'll even give you an extra 30 seconds.
Just following on the question that I asked of Ms. Gray, and I think she helped me make it clear. In terms of the evaluation of the 704 locations that came from the police, we know that they too had rigorous standards in setting them, but it was generally budget driven and not community driven. And so there was pent up demand to add locations. There's no question when the city took it over. So if in that evaluation we find that there are some that no longer meet the updated warrants, and I'm happy to hear that there's a probability component to what an intersection represents in safety, because sometimes communities know they have an intersection that's getting less and less safe, and yet the fatality hasn't happened yet. And so you don't want them to have to see an injury or a death in order to meet a warrant. And so using the probability and the analysis of the intersection is comforting. But we still are going to have to, if we have to make the difficult choice to remove a crossing guard, we're going to have to be willing to prioritize through Vision Zero. Is this a road that the speed cameras, 50 have already been installed near schools, and we know that they're useful because before the kids even got back to school, they have produced 22,000 speed warning letters and 1,200 in the case of one driver in 1 month.
12.
And so we know those cameras are effective.
Tickets.
The school zone markings, in my own experience in my ward, there are a couple of locations where they have been very effective. The watch your speed signs and the 30K has been very effective. So I'm happy to hear this from the director, but I hope this continues to be the case in every location. If a location does not meet the warrants that have been developed, I think that we have to put the counselor and the school trustee who are going to have to deliver the news, because often it's going to be up to them to deliver the news that the crossing guard, the human at that intersection, no longer meets the warrant, that the whole other bag of tools that we are using in Vision Zero will be employed on a prioritized basis at this intersection, because we know they're effective tools now from the data gathered over the last year. So we're going to have to be able to offer that as comfort and caveat to any changes to the school crossing guard program. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Is that motion? No, you need a little more time. Are there any other speakers on the item? No? Councillor Peruzzo, you've been very quiet over there. Do you have something to say? I think I'm just going to share a couple of observations, and it's sort of dovetailing onto what Councillor Carroll said about removing crossing guards. When we put in a signalized intersection based on warrants, if that intersection no longer meets the warrants, we don't take it down. If we put up a stop sign based on warrants approved by Community Council and City Council, and something changes in the neighborhood and that stop sign no longer meets the warrants for some reason, we don't take it down. To set up crossing guards and have parents, families, seniors, whoever uses that crosswalk, all of a sudden lose that protection and lose that service can be very disheartening and very, very dangerous as well. I would say that we have to be very careful if we're going to start removing these any kind of crossing guards. Remember, the program is called Vision Zero. It's not Vision 5%, it's not Vision 10%, it's Vision Zero. And it's true, it comes with a cost, it comes with a very heavy cost. But we have to proceed very cautiously before we start yanking those school or neighborhood crossing guards. Okay, Councillor Cole, I think your motion is ready on this item.
Okay. Is it up on the board or? It's coming. Oh, sorry. Anyway, sorry for the rush.
Wait, you have a golf game at noon?
No, I'm not rushing. I'm saying I'm sorry to rush staff. Golf, you can't get on the courses. They said you got to wait 3 months to play 9 holes at Scarlet Woods. So golf, forget it. They're too popular. So this is why I walk. I run. Can't golf.
We're going to have a major golf usage report coming to this committee. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, okay, that's up. Okay, thank you very much, staff, for writing this up, because this came up as a result of our discussions here. I'm moving that the Infrastructure Environment Committee amend the list of the new schools in Appendix 5 by adding the following new location. I know there's 30 in the list. I'm asking that 50 Amir Avenue at St. Margaret's Beatrice Catholic School on Amir Avenue. If you know the area, it's where Amir meets Neptune, and there's a huge blind curve there. It's right beside the Baycrest Seniors Campus, the entrance to Baycrest Arena and Baycrest Park. And there's a lot of density there with a lot of apartments there. And plus, this school is new. So what happened, this was the old Flemington School. It was by the TDSB. It closed down and it was empty. Now, the Catholic school took it over, and they now have a full school operating there. And they've been begging me for the last year for a crossing guard. And I was just shocked that it's not on the list of new 30, because it's not as if we want to, as some councillors mentioned, it's difficult to take a guard from one area and move to another. And that's why I welcome this report that they're going to review some of these, because I know of one location where the crossing guard is at Dufferin and Castlefield. It was there, I assume, for the Briar Hill Public School, which closed 5 years ago. So I don't know whether the crossing guard is there. Sure, and it would meet the warrants maybe, because there's a lot of traffic on Castlefield, on Dufferin, you know, right near California Sandwiches there at the corner. It's a very busy corner, but yet there's no school there. There's no school all up and down Dufferin until south of Eglinton at DB Hood. So I just think that we need to have a more flexible, informed way of deciding where these crossing guards go. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we don't ask the crossing guards to do a count. They could do an approximate count. They could do a weekly report. I mean, with all the technology we have, give them a counter of some sort, we should get a good idea, because how can you do a warrant for a location if you don't have a count of how many children or how many people, adults, residents are crossing? We don't know, because we don't do that count. And so I think it's critical that we start asking that there be some accurate counting done and use that as part of the warrant system. It's not going to be the end-all and be-all for determining whether they get a crossing guard, but I think this is a glaring omission that we don't have this count. And because this program, I think, if I recollect, is up to now about $30 million a year. And I think when the police had it, they were budgeting $11 million. So this is a big investment in safety. It's needed, but we've got to just make sure that it's effective, and that these decisions of where they go is made with the best information possible. And that is why I'm moving this motion to include this site at this very dangerous curve where this new school is located, and that the people also want to access both sides of Amir, because we have all these public facilities on the other side of Amir on a dangerous curve where the school is located. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any questions for the mover? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
I have a question of staff on this motion.
We don't really go to staff. We can deviate from procedure.
To ask questions of staff.
Okay. The request of a committee member, we're going to vary procedures and go back to staff. And I would hope the questions are related to the motion before us.
They are 100%.
Pardon?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate your advice, Councillor Perruzza, but I'm good. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, do you want to proceed?
Yes, my first question, are staff aware of this intersection, this place, this location? Do staff know of this location?
Through the chair, no, I'm not familiar with this particular location.
So no one's really come to you and asked you for your advice or help on this particular location?
Through the chair, in terms of being escalated to myself as director, no, I have not been made aware of this.
And if you were asked to do a study or do a warrant count, would you be able to do that?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely.
Would that take you
And
long?
I just wanted to add, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, that we also have 100 additional warrant count requests that are in the queue that need to be done starting in October. This is beyond the 30 that we're proposing for this location. There's 100 additional locations where warrant requests have already been made.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you very much. But if we asked you to have a look at that, you could go and have a look at that.
There is a process to fill out that includes the local counselor and the school to request a warrant count, and we would certainly put that on the list to be assessed, yes.
So if I came with like 3 or 4 locations that hadn't had warrant counts to this committee, would you support their approval?
We would go and ask for them to be put through the process to do a warrant assessment.
How do you feel about me just coming and asking that you assign crossing guards to certain locations without the study?
Well, I think that, this is a new process, so I can understand that there might be some confusion about that, but we have a very rigorous data-driven process for addressing new locations. It was one of the reasons why this program is relatively significant and substantial, is in part because of the data analysis that's required to add new guards. And so we would definitely want to have it go through that process like we've asked everybody else to do.
Let's say we grant this request right now. Would you do the review? Would this location be added as part of your review to see if it met the warrants?
It would certainly go on the list to be reviewed. As I mentioned, there are already 100 sites in the queue, so I don't know, Roger, what the burn rate is in terms of doing that warrant assessment. I think those 100 sites will be reviewed starting in October, and then we would do another batch in the springtime. So there are 2 time frames by which we know we're going to get the most robust counts in the fall and in the spring to assess crossing guards.
I guess my question is more specific. If we give the local counselor the benefit of the doubt that there's a crossing, we need a crossing guard here, will you go back and add this list to the 100 so that it'll come back to see if we actually made the right decision or whether the crossing guard is not needed at that location?
We would work with the counselor on the process to add this to the list of 100, right? So we would go back and ensure that he and the school principal had the information to fill out the application, and then we would put it in the list to be assessed. So yes, we would do it. It would just go in the next batch that we have available to assess.
All right, I just have a question of the mover of the motion.
Are you, Councillor, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, are you done?
No, I said I had a question of the mover of the motion.
Okay. Okay, you were on questions of staff. Okay.
Staff, okay.
Okay, so, okay, we'll go back to questions for the mover.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if Councillor Cole would add to his motion that if we were to approve it today, that be added to the 100 that are being reviewed for warrants so that we can understand whether we essentially give him the benefit of the doubt that the crossing guard is required, but that it gets reviewed as part of the 100. It gets reviewed to evaluate whether a crossing guard is required.
Well, let me think about that, but just to clarify something, I did contact staff and ask them to review this location over a year ago. I can show the emails and the communication I had where I asked for an investigation to see why we couldn't listen to the request by the local school to get the crossing guard there. So this shouldn't be new to staff, but I definitely did communicate with them and discuss this location of 50 Amir because it was a serious safety concern. So I just want to include this because, again, there is an urgency here given the location. and the request that's been ongoing, and the fact we've got a new school there and it's not recognized the school even exists.
Would you be okay if I added as a friendly amendment to your motion that this be put on the list to be reviewed for warrants?
I'm not sure what friendly amendment are you asking for?
Well,
Okay.
you've asked that for a crossing guard at this location.
Yes.
And and there's a warrant system where we're doing a review. And, because this is not being recommended by staff, the committee doesn't really know whether it's necessary or not. So this would be, if I voted for it, I'm happy to give you the benefit of the doubt that it's needed. But at the back end, I'd like a review by staff to look at the warrants to see whether, based on their warrant system, whether it's actually needed.
No, I don't consider that friendly because I have brought this up to staff. I can not understand why it's not part of the 30 when I emphasized the dangers here, again, months ago to our staff, and why this was not considered is beyond me. Especially in light of the fact, as I said, there are some other locations that should have been changed perhaps because the schools have closed down, for instance. This is why I find it frustrating, and I want to proceed with getting a crossing guard there to provide safety for these children at this school on Amir Avenue.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, I think you've got your answer. He's not going to accept it as a friendly amendment. If you want to move the motion, then we can vote on it and refer it off to staff for study. I think it's a reasonable motion. I don't know if I'll support it, but I mean, it's a reasonable request. Any other questions for the mover? Let's go to speakers. Any speakers on the item? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, are you going to move a motion to amend? And refer it to staff for study?
Yeah, actually, I am going to move a motion to refer it to staff for study. I want to support the counselor, and I want to support the system.
He's referring
and the system,
to Councillor Coles.
If we're going to give credibility and legitimacy to the system, we have to follow the rules. And we can't be putting cost money. We can't be putting them anywhere. I don't know the counselor's history with regard to talking to staff. I'd like to support him. And if it meets the warrant system, I'm happy to, support that then. But in the absence of the information, we've just adopted a warrant system. We shouldn't be, going around looking for exceptions, because then there are just going to be more locations that are going to be approved without the warrant system. And that has implications not only for Councillor Cole, it has implications for every member of council. When someone from the community says that they want a crossing guard, and we're going to have to say, well, there's a warrant system, and they'll say, well, you gave one to Councillor Cole. So I just want to see and support the system that we've adopted, and if Councillor Cole's location is warranted, 100%. Let's go forward and do that. I'm finished.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong has moved a motion to refer. Are there any other speakers on the item? I would simply say that technically Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong is correct. If 25 councillors started moving motions to add here and add there, it would undermine our whole system. That being said, this is a rarity, and we have to sometimes rely on our local councillors for their advice and knowing what goes on the ground. They've been working on it for a year. I'm prepared to support the local council and not support referral, despite the risk of the precedents it sets. And that's all I have to say. Okay. So we'll vote on referral first. Okay. All those in favor of referral? I can't can't see anyone's vote. Okay. I see Councillor Layton in favor of referral, Deputy Mayor Minna Wong in favor of referral. All those opposed? That loses. On the motion itself, the amendment by Councillor Cole to add this to the list. 50 Amir Avenue, St. Margaret Beatrice Catholic School. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And the item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. You never see yourself. Well, it's... do you want to snuggle in with someone else and try and photobomb their video, or what would you like to do? No? Okay, maybe. Okay, if you want to talk to tech services. So we're on to 15.8, request to study environmental impact of two-stroke engine garden equipment. I have 4 deputies for this item. Is Harold Smith on the line?
Measures used elsewhere instead of inefficient procedures.
What? Is Harold Smith?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. You're deputing on the item called a request to study the environmental impact of two-stroke engine garden equipment. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Okay. Mr. Chair and committee members, small engine pollution is significant. Two-cycle garden equipment like gas leaf blowers and mowers are the dirtiest. Environment Canada states 1 hour of lawnmower use equals driving 480 kilometers from Ottawa to Quebec City. And the California Air Resources Board states gas-powered lawn and garden equipment can contribute heavily to local and regional air pollution, and by 2031, small engine emissions will be more than twice those from passenger cars. Gas leaf blower pollution and COVID-19. A recent Harvard study found that long-term exposure to gas-powered leaf blower pollution may significantly raise the risk of death from COVID-19. Researchers found a 1 microgram increase in concentration of fine particles was associated with a 15% increase in the risk of COVID-19 related death. Landscape workers face disproportionate COVID-19 risks. Gas leaf blower exhaust near workers' airways, and I think the same applies to all gas equipment, exposes them to concentrated pollution, increasing their risk of COVID-19 complications and death, and boosting chances of spreading COVID to others. Few workers wear breathing protection. Most travel in vans or trucks, making safe physical distancing impossible. Noise. Gas leaf blower noise and other gas-powered equipment degrades hearing and causes stress-mediated disorders like heart disease, psychological disturbances, and metabolic abnormalities, some of which increase COVID-19 risk. This intense noise interrupts concentration, impairs illness recovery, and disrupts children's learning and people's ability to work at home. Other issues. Major health and environmental organizations, including the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Lung Association, the National Institutes of Health, physicians groups, and various medical societies warn against the use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. Several medical societies passed resolutions discouraging gas leaf blower use. Non-compliant excessive gas leaf blower use. Workers run blowers at the highest setting, generating excessive noise and large clouds of fine particulate matter and dust. Landscapers using blowers unnecessarily blow grass clippings weekly, an environmentally unsound practice, degrading lawn, soil, and plant health. This deprives plant beds of nutrient-rich organic matter. It also causes insect and biodiversity loss. The weekly dust and debris blowing, especially with 200 mile-per-hour jets, is hazardous to health and contrary to industry recommendations. Some inappropriately use these machines for dirt, sand, and snow removal. Enforcement. Enforcement must incorporate effective and faster measures used elsewhere instead of Toronto's inefficient procedures. Suggested strategies are ticketing workers with gas-powered equipment, accepting time-stamped emailed photos as evidence, and stationing inspectors in neighborhoods crews frequent. And I can think of Forest Hill, North Toronto, Bridle Path. There are plenty of areas that, it must be strategic. Education. Toronto must warn residents and industry about the serious health and environmental and climate risks from gas-powered equipment to increase awareness and acceptance. About 200 US and several GTA companies already use electric battery-operated machines. Entire municipalities and school districts certified as American Green Zone Alliance green zones are operating with electric and manual tools for all routine maintenance. These cities and schools have substantially reduced toxic and carcinogenic emissions, noise, waste, and carbon dioxide. An American Green Zone certified golf course cut 10 tons of toxic poisonous pollution every single year. South Pasadena, the first US American Green Zone Alliance city, banned gas-powered garden equipment.
Sorry, if you could, Harold, if you could just wrap up. You're pretty well at 5 minutes.
I'm almost there. Thus eliminating all fossil fuel consumption and toxic emissions from this equipment and cut noise by half. It's light years ahead of Toronto and many other cities. Ice caps are shrinking, wildfires are burning the US, and 2019 was among the warmest on record. 200 US cities and towns and 4 Canadian cities restrict or ban this type of equipment, in particularly gas leaf blowers. Toronto must ban gas-powered equipment to protect our health, the environment, and our climate. Please pass this motion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for that deputation. Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you, Harold. Monty McDonald? We have Monty on the line?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there you are. Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I am a retired chemical engineer, and I'm the co-chairman of the Bayview Village Association Environment Committee. I speak with experience in industrial health and safety going back 40 years on regulation of carcinogenic chemicals in the petrochemical industry. The major point source of air pollution in Toronto is the two-cycle gas-driven leaf blower, or GLB, as you've just heard. 30% of the fuel goes through unburned. Oil companies warn us at the station pumps with placards that inhaling gasoline causes cancer. I have had little success in my role in convincing lawn maintenance contractors and the major users who are the major users of GLBs and the homeowners they serve that leaf blowers are a serious health hazard and not to use the machines in the summer months. I want to make 3 points that were contained in the letter I sent to the committee. First of all, let's look at the health hazard to GLB operators and compare it to how the Ontario government is protecting workers from exposure to these carcinogens. Benzene is a gasoline component. The Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act classifies benzene as a designated substance with a short-term exposure limit of 2.5 parts per million in air in the workplace. Taking into account the excess air going into a leaf blower, I've done a calculation of how much of this 30% of the fuel appears in the exhaust. And it comes out to 7.3% when you account for the excess combustion air. I went and conservatively assumed that only 10% of this fuel has carcinogens like benzene. So an operator would be exposed to 1/10 of that at 7,300 parts per million of the carcinogens exiting the machine, which is 2 feet away, strapped to his back. This is 2,900 times the OSHA short-term exposure limit of 2.5 parts per million, which is the worst an operator in his or her workplace using benzene will experience. So you could say all lawn mowing maintenance contractors are in violation of the Occupational Health and Safety Act unless they have their employees wearing carbon filter masks. The Ontario Ministry of Labour visits workplaces that use designated substances and measures the level in the air to ensure companies are complying with exposure limits. It's very doubtful the Ministry of Labour has ever visited a site where GLBs are operating. Besides the GLB operator, think how neighbors next door are going to get exposed to these chemicals. If you smell gasoline, you've ingested it. 50 feet away, you can smell a leaf blower exhaust. So, two-cycle GLB should be banned in Toronto from May through September as a first step to protect health of workers and the public. The high-velocity air, which travels at 200 miles an hour and generates very fine particulate matter, this dust can stay airborne for days and is a danger to people with lung disease. Electrically driven leaf blowers also produce dust, but at a much lower rate. However, because these blowers are not needed in the summer, I advocate the city go all the way and ban all types of blowers in the summer season for lawn maintenance and year-round by city workers. Second point, I'd like to refer to the documented evidence of health hazards from the world-leading work done by the California Air Resources Board. In the 1950s, Caltech and UCLA studied air pollution and found that the two main components of automobile exhaust, unburned hydrocarbons and nitrous oxides, plus sunlight and moist air from the ocean, make smog, which severely affects lung health. In 1967, Ronald Reagan signed the governor of California signed the Air Resources Act, which gave them authority to set their own quality rules. That same year, CARB, California Air Resources Board, issued the first tailpipe emission standards to the auto industry, which had to be met before they could sell cars in the state. Over the ensuing years, CARB has continued to raise the bar with tighter and tighter tailpipe emissions. They have collaborated with Caltech, who has provided research to the automotive industry, which has produced technologies like the catalytic converter and positive crankcase ventilation. Today, automobiles sold around the world are 99% cleaner than in the 60s. That is, the pollution is only 1% of what it was in 1960. So CARB has recently determined that PM...
Monty, if you could just wrap up, you're approaching 5 minutes.
Okay. CARB has recently determined that PM 2.5 is responsible for most of the air pollution deaths in the state. 80 cities have implemented year-round bans. So in summary, I just request that the committee adopt the excellent work of CARB rather than starting from scratch. Sheila Basrer, Chief Medical Officer in 2001, recommended a summer ban using CARB research. City Council rejected her proposal.
Okay.
I did have
all right. Well, thank you. We're done. But if you've missed anything out, maybe you can add it in your answers if questions are coming from committee members. Any questions to the deputant? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I will just ask what that last point was that Mr. McDonald was about to make.
Oh, you want to know what the last point was?
I think if you read your last sentence, we're good.
Okay, I was going to, well, the last sentence was regarding Sheila Basrer. Did you get that point?
I heard something about that, yeah.
Okay, I guess what I did say that Sheila Basrer, Chief Medical Officer in 2001, recommended a summer ban, citing CARB research. Toronto City Council rejected the proposal. So here we are 19 years later asking for the same thing.
Okay.
And if you wanted to know the wrap-up point,
if I could just ask a follow-up question, Monty. So that was 19 years ago, and it was just shortly before I became elected. So in the interim, between then and now, is there a refresh in the research? Is there a refresh in the types of approaches to dealing with two-stroke engine garden equipment? Is there a reason we should actually ask staff to go back and look again and write a report 19 years later?
Well, I believe there's a lot more research that's been done by the California Air Resources Board, which has basically just validated all the study work done in the past about how the dangers of these machines. And I guess the most recent one was done by just a month or two ago, in actually May of 2020, when Harvard School of Public Health talked about particulate matter. And there was a very interesting statistic they talked about that 1 microgram, that's a millionth of a gram of this particulate matter that would come out of a leaf blower. If it's breathed in by somebody with COVID-19, it increases their chance of death by 10%. A leaf blower, the average leaf blower produces 30 million micrograms per hour. That's just 30 grams, and you could hold it in your hand. But this dust is very, very fine. It's such that 1 microgram of that getting into the lungs of somebody with COVID-19 and people with all lung diseases. You start breathing in all this crap that's in that dust. You know, for instance, street dust that the lawn mowing contractors, they're not following practices that their own association recommends, and they blow the grass clippings off the lawn and all the dust down the street. Street dust contains asbestos from brake lining wear and carbon black from tire wear. And in a pulverized, very fine form in your lungs, they're both carcinogens. So there's some very recent research that just emphasizes we got to get these machines off the street.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for this deputant? No? Okay. Final deputant.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Third deputant, Chris Keating.
Yes, I'm online. How can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr. Keating. You have 5 minutes.
Great. I'm with the Environment Committee of the Deer Park Residents Group, and the points that I wanted to make, that if you think of this, the fact that asbestos insulation, lead water pipes, lead in gasoline, a catalytic converter on vehicle exhausts to reduce toxic gases, smoking in public spaces, seat belts in cars, and the current reduction of pesticides in gardens. These are all things that we are now have done, and we look back on it and said, how the hell did we ever get here in the first place? In addition to that, Ontario has a flue gas desulfurization, which is one of the most leading in the world. And the coal in Ontario, as we know, we're now out of coal, and Ontario was the first province or state in North America to successfully phase out the burning of coal to produce electricity. This has been described as the single largest regulatory action in North America to reduce greenhouse gases. The point I want to make is that the reducing of domestic air pollution and tracking of air quality in Canada is being passed by Canada's Clean Air and Climate Change Act, but they're asking that all levels of government work together to improve the air quality development, air quality standards, and to limit the amount of pollution. Now, this summer, to change our priorities and how we maintain our homes and our gardens by not using two-stroke engine garden equipment, there is the alternative of battery equipment, which is now available, which 20 years ago, this wasn't available. So there is an alternative for these other organizations. Once people learn of the dangers from the two-stroke engine garden equipment, they can influence their landscape contractors to a less noisy and less toxic alternative, such as a battery-powered equipment. This summer, the DPRG passed two-stroke engine garden equipment, and specifically leaf blowers. They passed a motion to ban it. I also personally dropped a letter in the mailboxes of my neighbors on my street and surrounding streets. The letter said that COVID-19 has changed the world. Now more than ever, we think about our health, and as many neighbors will be away on vacation this summer, I have a request from those who remain in Toronto, that perhaps you would consider asking your landscape company not to use gas-powered leaf blowers and lawnmowers while you're away on vacation. This would be appreciated and would mean less disturbance for your neighbors. I got a hell of a good response from this. Of about the 15 people that are around me, there's only 2 who are now currently doing leaf blowing on their lawns. I appreciate, and this is the time when the leaves will start to fall off. So I think common sense, public policy decisions that can stay ahead of this, we can take precautions ahead of it's the community. I think that's the end of my speech.
Great.
And I hope you liked it.
No, I thought it was very moving. Thank you, Mr. Keating, for your comments. Any questions to the deputy? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Keating. Kathy McDonald.
Yes, I'm speaking now. Is that working?
Yep. Thank you very much for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm speaking today on behalf of the Toronto Noise Coalition that was established in 2016 to help provide a voice for residents across the city in the development of a new noise bylaw. So today the discussion is about studying the impact of two-stroke engine equipment, which produces noise and pollution, as outlined by Harold Monte and Chris. During our work with the development of the new noise bylaw, the coalition tried to get restrictions on the use of the two-stroke garden equipment, but failed to do so. The MLS staff report on the new bylaw said they weren't going to make any changes because they did a survey of only 1,000 city residents, and the number of complaints about leaf blowers was very low, but 1,000 doesn't really represent our large and complex city, and many areas of the city have residents raising issues about the noise and pollution of leaf blowers. So we're very pleased to support the motion today so that the city can finally undertake a comprehensive study of the significant negative impacts of two-stroke engines and develop the needed new regulations and strategies for implementation and programs. Public consultation and public education has to be part of the process. So we look forward to the much belated and needed updates to city regulations of the two-stroke garden engine equipment to reduce harmful noise and pollution. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. Any questions for the deputant? No questions.
Yeah.
No questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. Questions for staff? I don't see any.
I have a question.
Deputy Mayor Wong, I do not see you, but if you, yes, there you are. Okay, questions for staff?
Yeah, are lawnmowers two-stroke or four-stroke engines?
Do we have staff here to answer that question? I plug mine in. I have electrics, so I really can't chime in on that.
So it's Carlton here. I'm not sure who that's directed to. I don't know the answer to that either, but our team did, as you know, the work on the noise bylaw, but I'm not an expert in lawnmowers or leaf blowers.
You live in a condo, Carlton?
No, I don't. Mine is, no, I have a, mine's battery operated.
I'm kidding. Well, no,
Can I have a crack at
question to this discussion? Because if you live in a single family home, you probably have a lawnmower.
Sorry, there's Mr. Baxter. I think he's trying to jump in and answer the question.
just with respect to 2 versus 4 stroke, I think the vast majority, if not all of the new lawnmowers, the new gas-powered lawnmowers that are sold are 2-stroke. Or 4-stroke. 2-stroke were basically eliminated a number of years ago. So 2-stroke is a predominant technology in gas-powered lawnmowers.
And do they create pollution as well?
They burn gasoline. Yep, they do. 2-stroke engines are much dirtier. You're mixing oil with the gasoline, and that ends up in the exhaust. So gasoline engines are better from an environmental perspective, but they're still burning gasoline.
Right. And what's so for everyone who has lawn equipment that uses a 2-stroke engine, what's the if we were to say that you can't use them anymore, what's their solution?
There are, I guess, 3 technologies. The 4-stroke engines are readily available. Electric lawnmowers are more and more available.
Sir, let me be clear.
Okay.
I'm now excluding lawnmowers, so leaf blowers and other small, lawn maintenance equipment and other equipment. So for other like leaf blowers and such things like that, and other sort of popular equipment, what are their alternatives?
I think for each piece of gasoline-powered lawn equipment, there is now an electrical equivalent, right? So battery technology is getting better, cheaper, and more available.
Well, okay. So my next question is has anyone done an analysis on how much it would cost for what's the difference in price between a comparable in terms of performance, a comparable piece of equipment that's electric versus 2-stroke?
We haven't done that analysis.
Okay. Do you think we should have some sensitivity to families all across the city who might be forced to buy new equipment?
We'll take our direction from council. I mean, I think that, for us, we would always, because our basic mandate in environment and energy is a reduction of carbon, we would say go for the lower carbon option all the time.
But you don't have any feeling for the sensitivity to families that might have to buy new equipment?
Well, I think what would happen normally is if you're looking to buy a new piece of equipment to replace when it burns out, I think we would hope that at that time you would consider going the lower carbon option.
So you didn't answer my question.
Do you have
any sensitivity or sympathy or understanding of someone who just bought a new piece of equipment and now you're going to tell them they can't use it anymore?
I think that you have to be aware of that. But I think that from an environmental perspective, the city council approved this direction to go carbon neutral by 2050. So I think at some point, whether each individual making these decisions has to recognize the city's objective here.
Okay, that was your last question.
To go 100% in waste diversion by year 2000.
Deputy Mayor, that was your last question. You're over 5 minutes. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I'm pleased that Mr. Baxter is to the floor. I just want to be sure, is it crystal clear to you in the motion that what is being asked of staff is not only to look at the harm to the environment of the 2-stroke engine, but to look at the existing bans across 100 cities so that we would get information back if we received this report on what is the impact of a full ban, but also looking at what has been the impact of those areas that have done seasonal bans, such that you greatly reduce the use of leaf blowers to blow everything but leaves all summer long, so that you're not asking people to get rid of their personal leaf blowers simply to limit the use. It's clear from the motion that we would ask you to look at both approaches, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it's also, it should also be clear that that if it was the outcome for staff that they chose to suggest a ban of either seasonal or year round, what would also be clear is there would be some suggestion as to how we do that. Someone may just have bought one. The deputy mayor is correct. And so generally speaking, when we ban something, when we ban pesticides, for instance, we had a phased approach, which would allow people the time to adapt to the new rules, to deal with the situation, such that the report we're requesting might include alternatives, four-stroke engines, which are much cleaner, the many cordless electric alternatives that are the same price and much cleaner, not quieter, but cleaner. All of those types of things might be included in this report. Is it clear that that's what we're looking for from the way the motion is crafted?
I think it is.
I'm trying to hear the staff answer.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Those are my questions. I'll be. I would like to be on the speakers list.
Okay, any other questions for staff? I would just add, Councillor Carroll touched on it slightly, but we could have a multi-year phase-in if this was to go forward. And I'm just wondering whether that's something which staff would take as an undertaking.
I can only speak for EED. That's something that we would have to look at. I mean, I point out that EED's interest here is specifically about carbon reduction. Transform TO is our strategy to reduce carbon. There are dimensions to this that we would need to consult with other divisions to get their input on as well, public health, NLS, and others.
And could we grandfather ownership? In other words, if you owned it, you could continue to use it up to a certain date or what have you, so we don't penalize people who just ran out to Canadian Tire to buy new equipment for.
I think we would take that direction from council.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for staff? Let's go to speakers. I see Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, what is really shocking to me is the number of people that have communicated back to us, and the number of actual full ratepayers associations, and in fact the particular ratepayers associations that have communicated. A lot of them in Midtown, FONTRA members. I brought this motion on the encouragement of one ratepayers association whose environment committee has been working on this for a long time, dating all the way back to Councillor Michael Walker's motion years and years and years ago. At that time, there weren't a lot of cities that had done a ban or even a seasonal ban. Between that time and this time, what is frustrating is that the use of two-stroke engines by summer companies for grass clippings, not leaves, when that grass could easily be left on the lawn and is in fact good for the lawn, has increased hugely. And there are studies that indicate that. So what's the problem with the two-stroke engine? You think two-stroke, four-stroke, wouldn't four-stroke be worse? That is another gas-powered type of lawn equipment, and particularly in the leaf blower category. The problem here with the two-stroke engine is they're trying to get a lot of torque with just 2 turns, and so they do it by mixing gas with oil and burning it through unfiltered. And so it is way dirtier than that 4-stroke engine, and of course dirtier than moving to cordless battery-powered and electric equipment. There are a lot more products on the market now than there were when Councillor Walker was bringing this forward, having heard from his association, Deer Park. There are a lot more alternatives, and I would ask the staff to focus on this from the environmental perspective. While there are people that have mentioned noise today, I would like to get a report back from the medical officer of health and staff. I'm not asking for the ban today. I'm asking for the staff to update themselves on the research and then let them decide. And the reason I want them to focus on the environmental aspects from the air quality and the carbon perspective and not noise is because the alternatives make noise as well. I'm not trying to ban leaf blowers altogether, although, you know, for grass clippings, either leave it on the lawn or use your bag mower. Most people have a bag, but it's sitting in the shed and they just never use it. But what I'm asking them to do is look at the air quality, because the alternatives do make noise. A lot of the electric equipment, while lighter in weight, still makes a noise. The four-stroke products are actually quieter and cleaner. There are a lot of alternatives in the same price range and often cheaper that people can be looking at. Many have already converted to them. But I'm not going to, as a result of this report, remove the fact that it's possible that if you're trying to sleep until 10 o'clock on Sunday, that someone might run their leaf blower at 8:30 in the morning. I'm not asking to ban that. I'm asking to ban the dirtiest engine there is out there, and that is the two-stroke engine. And so I need staff to look at the updated research and how the bans that have been introduced in 100 cities play out, whether seasonal or all year round, and how they were implemented, such facts as that. And so I ask that this committee take the first step and simply get that report back. The big decision is not before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other? Okay, Councillor Peruzza. Councillor Peruzza, no, thank you very much for all this advice. Are there any other speakers on this item? Do I see Councillor Layton? Oh, and Councillor Cole. Oh, and Councillor Peruzza? No? Your hand's up. Okay. So, Councillor Layton, I think I saw your hand up. And Councillor, and then Councillor Cole.
Being very brief, I think it's about time we looked at some of these data technologies and started taking them out of service. These are technologies that pollute our environment, that cause public health issues, and as we heard, are a menace in the noise that they create. We had the opportunity 20 years ago, but we could have been out front on this. We didn't take it. Let's take it now. Let's get this report and see what we can do and if it is of value to the public good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton, for that very brief speech. Councillor Cole.
Yeah, again, I think this is long overdue, and we're just asking for a report to see whether we can get some definitive information about that two-stroke engine and how it can be replaced with a battery-operated blower or four-stroke. And it's almost, it's not so much a ban, it's almost a alternative way of dealing with your leaves and grass clippings, whatever it is. And you know, the thing that concerns me about these leaf blowers is that, you know, we've had the summer of COVID where, as you know, construction has been accelerated to where they can start constructing at 6 in the morning and they go till, I don't know, till sunset. So this has been a very noisy summer, certainly in my ward, where there has been nonstop dump trucks, deliveries, banging, drilling, and then on top of it you throw in these leaf blowers. So you can see how people are already on edge. I know streets like Craighurst, Briar Hill, all up and down the Yonge Avenue Road corridor, there's so much infilling. You know, you can't drive down Briar Hill without seeing about 50 white vans all parked all day long on our side streets because every second house is being torn down, topped up, shored up. And so you add on all this construction plus these extremely disruptive machines. So it really does impact one's quality of life, I think. And so we've got to find a better way of dealing with leaves and grass clippings. And we don't need to, use these extremely disruptive machines. And I think there's value in finding alternatives and weaning people off these noisemakers into something more reasonable. I know when we banned pesticide use in our front lawns, many people in the industry were really upset about this. They said, well, we won't be able to, the landscaping business will be destroyed. Well, I think the landscaping business is one of the most viable businesses still thriving in Toronto. And, the bottom line is the operators of these landscaping companies who were using the pesticides on a daily basis, I think, are much healthier now because they're not using pesticides. Just as if they weren't using these two-stroke engines, we could also deal with the health and safety of these men and women who work in our backyards, front yards, for the city and cleaning our parks and so forth. So I think this is long overdue, and I hope we get on to this report and wean people off these noisemakers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other speakers to this item? Yes, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly, Mr. Chair. I can't but recognize the fact that the nanny state is alive and well in the city of Toronto. First, it was the banning of cosmetic pesticides when the science showed that the real culprit was agricultural pesticides, but we never recognized that. Then you can't even wash your car in your driveway now. In the city of Toronto. And even with the cosmetic pesticides, what we see is the total destruction of our parks where weeds have taken over, and you see that all across the lawns in the city of Toronto. And here we are again trying to overregulate and tell people what to do. And I just think that we should leave this alone. We shouldn't be trying to overregulate in the city of Toronto. And if we decide to move forward with this, just some real practical matters, which, people don't seem to even want to think about. How much is this going to cost a family who wants to take, there are people that are so proud of their lawns and gardens, and families are having a tough time getting along. And, taking care of your garden is not a cheap arrangement. And we should have some level of sensitivity, some level of understanding, as opposed to, preaching and hectoring to people what they should and shouldn't be doing. That's the approach that the city should be taking, not just spending all our time telling them what they can and can't do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Are there any other speakers on the item? Okay. Is that it for speakers? Okay. The item is before us. It originated as a member's motion. It did not approve. It did not waive referral at council. It's a report request. All those in favor? So I'm just giving you a little history. It came originally as a member's motion to council, did not get the votes to waive referral. It's now a committee. We've debated it, and now we're sending it off to staff for a report. Yeah, all those in favor? Opposed? Opposed? That is carried. We're on to, oh, well, we did hold item 4 down.
Oh, we have item 4 down, so let's proceed to that.
Yeah, we can go back to item 4. And also, is it the will of committee to extend and work to finish? Yeah, all those in favor of extending to finish the agenda? Those in favor, opposed? That is carried. So if you want to go back to item number 4, I believe we were waiting for a motion from Councillor Layton, which has been circulated.
We may want to, Mr. Chair, we may want to give committee members some time, as it's somewhat lengthy, and if there are other items, maybe we could just go through those. I just don't want to rush people to read through it.
All right. So
it has been vetted by staff and our legal department, I would add.
You want to walk us through it, Mike?
I'm sure, that's no problem. If it's the will of the chair.
Yeah, so if we're going to do the item, then if you want to walk it through, if councillors would like a little more time to digest it, we can hold it down a second time and finish up bike share, which is the last item on the agenda.
Let's digest.
Oh, no, sorry, it's the second last because we have an added item.
I move to digest.
Okay. Let's, Councillor Layton, let's just hold the item down again. The motion's been circulated. Councillors can take a look at it. Then when you speak to it, you can certainly explain it and go through it. Okay, so just to make it clear, Kevin Respingo from Cycle Toronto, you're... Oh, he's coming on. Okay. Kevin, can you hear us?
Hello.
Kevin? Kevin, can you hear us?
I'm not sure if it's coming through.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks for having me today, and thanks to the chair for bringing this motion forward. I think it's a very exciting opportunity here to expand and improve the Bike Share Toronto network in Toronto. I think we're at Cycle Toronto very supportive of the request for these improvements to be reported back on. The opportunity to extend the rental duration is, I think, very timely. The expansions that Bike Share has experienced recently have been phenomenal. I think the 200 square kilometers that now are covered, it's very clear, I think, that 30 minutes that's currently available for riding is inadequate, I think, to cover even a fair size of the network. Further, as we've now moved into the suburbs in North York and Scarborough, where destinations might be spread out more, or stations may also be further apart, it's, forgive me, I think someone might have been using a leaf blower outside my house. As we're now in the suburbs in North York and Scarborough, destinations might be spread out more, and therefore it means that people take longer to ride to where they need to. So I think having an opportunity to look at 45 minutes or even longer so that folks can get to where they're going and spend more time enjoying the bikes is a good opportunity and something we should look at exploring. Further, the motion talks about a low income pass, and I think what we have seen that the pandemic has highlighted, but has been the case for a long time as well, is that there are lots of folks in communities that may need access to more affordable ways of getting around that also can be healthy and helping maintain physical distance. And introducing a low-income barrier-free pass, as a lot of other bike share networks in other parts of the continent have done, is a great way to make this public resource, this public transportation network, more accessible for folks that may not be able to afford monthly passes for TTC on top of getting an annual bike share pass, or maybe the cost of purchasing their own bicycle is also too great. And lastly, I think we'd like to see the bike share stations aligned with new cycling infrastructure, particularly our on-road bike lanes. This year, we've seen a historic rollout of new cycling infrastructure in all parts of the city. And it would be great if, in addition to these on-road bike lanes, which are the key to getting people to ride, because they need to feel safe, it's also important that we give people access to bicycles to get around. So Cycle Toronto is very supportive of this. I think this lines up with many of the council goals that you have around climate action with Transform TO, with road safety around Vision Zero, with our rollout of the cycling network plan, our goals to manage congestion, and it makes this system, this public system, more accessible to residents of Toronto. It's more equitable, and ultimately it'll be more successful. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Any questions for the deputant? No? Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Councillor Ainsley, I see, and did I hear Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong? Or maybe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff. I did want to ask about the current 30-minute limit that people follow to when they're using the bike share. Can you explain how that was established or determined? And my understanding, it's a citywide 30-minute limit, regardless of where the bike stations are that you're using?
The council.
Our staff there? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hello? Yep.
Yes.
This is Sean Waldrake. I'm the manager at BikeShare. Councillor, this 30 minutes was established worldwide as a threshold to encourage sharing and returning of the bikes. This is something that we adopted over 10 years ago. And so far the numbers, the average length of trip has consistently been quite short for our annual members, usually around 15 minutes. And we've been monitoring the pilot areas, see if travel times are approaching over 30 minutes or close to 30 minutes. And if they are, then that's why it's a pilot. We're considering changing the time in the future to accommodate people's longer trips.
Okay, and Sean, if I got a bike share at City Hall, where would the next closest bike share station be from City Hall, for example?
There's two stations, one on Bay Street and one on Queen Street, right beside City Hall. There's another one just behind. So they're in the downtown core. There's usually a bike share station less than 200 meters from you.
Okay, and then in my ward, in Ward 24, in the southeast corner of Scarborough, how long is the distance between stations?
I don't know the average, Councillor, but it's significantly longer. I think it's probably closer to 400 meters.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then when it comes to the second part of the Chair Pasternak's request around the fee, I have 5 priority neighborhoods in my ward where the part of the pilot project is running in Scarborough. It's my understanding is as well it's a standard fee across the city regardless of where your bike station is.
Yes, that's true. And we have been looking at this option for low income or people who an equity program for a number of years. We've been working with Councillor Thompson's committee, as well as other groups. And we have not set a discount, but when we report back, we'll look at that. The part of the issue around this is determining who should actually get the discount and how it should be determined.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong?
Yeah, how much money are we losing right now in the bike share program?
I don't have this year's shortfall, but it is going to be similar to last year's.
What was that?
It was close to, it was over $1 million.
That wasn't always the case, was it? It used to be break even.
It was very close to break even, yes, when it was a smaller system.
Right, and so you've expanded the system and you're losing money because you're not getting as many riders, is that correct?
Our ridership has increased proportionally to our expansion. So, well, in the past, we would maybe get 600,000 trips in a year. Currently, we're on track to be more like 3 million trips.
Okay, so why are you losing money?
The system is very much like public transit, and if you, as a cost recovery system, you would be eliminating a lot of people from using the system if you raise the rates too high. Or currently, we are looking to engage, of course, a sponsor or advertiser to cover that shortfall, as council has directed.
And you don't have a sponsor, correct?
Not that I can. Well, we do have some partners, yes. So we have the CAA and some other smaller partners, but we don't have a system-wide sponsor.
I see. Do you think bike share should break even?
My advice would be that if we're going to provide a service to the people of Toronto, that it should be set up like transit and have an operating subsidy.
So you think it should lose money?
I think it's a service that's supporting active transportation in the city.
And how much more money? So this proposal is to actually change the timing arrangements and payment arrangements. Is that correct?
No, not yet. This is, you're talking about the a subsidy program for people who may not be able to afford the program?
Yes.
It could. That's what we're looking at. There may be room to limit it. Like, for example, currently we're offering a subsidy to frontline healthcare workers and are offering a discount membership to people, say, like at Sick Kids or Toronto General. And it hasn't negatively impacted our revenue overall. And so the program should be designed in which the people who really need that subsidy actually are getting it versus someone who maybe just wants a discount.
I see. All right. I have no further questions.
Any other questions? Any other questions of staff? I have a couple if nobody else does. To staff, isn't it correct that we're expanding bike share into the inner suburbs?
Yes, we are. We've made a number of expansions into Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke. We're basically at the border with Mississauga.
And would it be correct to assume that some of the distances in the inner suburbs as we expand are between docking stations or between high-level transit? The distances are much longer and people may need more time to keep within their sort of allotted overcharge threshold, below the overcharge.
Yes, Councillor, that's true. I have been monitoring say, for example, what's been going on in York University Station that's at Sentinel Road, and there hasn't been a behavior pattern that is very different from, say, someone using it in the waterfront trail in the central area. People seem to be making around a 30-minute trip.
So when it comes to city services, and I'm not sure who wants to answer this, but I've never really seen any divisions make money. Our libraries, our swimming pools, splash pads, our recreation centers, they're not profit centers. Do you think it's somewhat unfair that we would expect bike share, which is a city service as part of the shared economy, to turn a profit, where we don't expect any other city services, really, with the exception maybe of planning, to turn a profit?
That's definitely a policy decision from council, and I'll implement whatever the decision is. Currently, my direction is to try to find subsidies to be at little cost to the city of Toronto.
Okay. All right, those are my questions. Any other questions? If not, we can go to speakers. Anyone like to speak on the issue? Councillor Ainsley?
Thank you. Through you to the chair. I'm here as an outside committee member. My ward's in the southeast corner of Scarborough, Ward 24. As you heard in my questioning, I do have a pilot project in my ward, along with Councillor McKelvey's ward, who's beside me. It's something that my residents have been asking for a long time, and we have it. It's being well used. One of the chief concerns, though, has been the distance between stations. As you heard from my questioning of staff, for example, if you use a bike share station at Toronto City Hall, there's two within less than a 1-minute walking distance of each other if you want to get a bike and use the bike share program in downtown Toronto. I have 5 stations currently in my own ward. They're almost a 10 to 15 minute ride between stations. So when you're looking at a bike share, when you need a half hour to get it to your destination, shop, run errands, and then get it back to a station, that's very difficult within that 30-minute timeline in Eastern Scarborough. I also have 5 of our neighborhood improvement areas in my ward. So I'm very supportive of the second recommendation, and they're asking for a report back on variable fees that can be that people can make use of, whether they're in downtown Toronto, anywhere throughout the city of Toronto. But I think when you have 5 neighborhood improvement areas, as I do, those people would like to make use of the program. You can look at stats in the Scarborough area where people using public transit, 60% of ridership stays within the Scarborough area. And I think that you'll see very similar stats when you look at the bike share program, even when it's out of the pilot program into a full stage or fully utilized program in Scarborough. So I'm very supportive. I think the timelines need to be extended. Even if staff come back at a report and say, the 30 minutes works in the downtown core, but in the suburbs of Scarborough, North York, Etobicoke, a 45-minute timeline would work much better. So I'm fully supportive, and I want to thank Councillor Pasternak for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Cole, you mentioned earlier that you want to speak on this item?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Cole?
Just briefly, I'm totally supportive of this positive initiative in terms of bike share. And I think, just noticing, everywhere I go, I see more and more people availing themselves of bike share. It's very encouraging to see that it's become so widespread, and I think it's a growing initiative, and it's very needed, given the fact is that people now want to exercise, they want to get around the city, they don't want to maybe go on transit with the crowds, etc. They don't want to use the car. And so it's very, very good for the city's health and not for individuals' health. And it's very important that we continue to grow it. I just want to add to your motion, Mr. Chairman, is that as a result of COVID, there have been many subcommittees at City Council. We've been working on different initiatives, and one of the initiatives that myself and the Deputy Mayor Thompson have been working on is a program called Bikes for All, whereby it was a motion passed by council where we would try and get cycling, bicycles into communities where perhaps they couldn't afford to get a bicycle. They may have had 4 or 5 kids and they could only afford a bicycle for one child and not the others. So to make bikes available through donations to the Toronto Partnership, and also by using Bike Share, where we could also get the Affinity Pass used for people who might be able to avail themselves of the Bike Share program through support from the city. So we're in the final stages of releasing this with Councillor Thompson, myself, and Manjit from Toronto Partnership. And one of the ideas that dovetails with what this motion is about is a very exciting proposal we're going to be coming forward with called Bike TO, which is going to create bike libraries in Toronto. So that is our goal, as we hope to announce in the next month or so. We'll have bike libraries where, just like where you go take out a book, you'll be able to take out a bicycle with your library card. So that these bike libraries hopefully will be available throughout the city. We're also lining up some corporate donations whereby they will perhaps contribute to the city as part of this COVID relief to make bikes available for the citizens of Toronto who may not be able to afford a bicycle. And as you know, the big challenge we have right now is you can't buy a bicycle in Toronto. I mean, they're almost impossible to find. They're getting very expensive, and I would hope that we can do something about that. Maybe we can get CCM back here and Raleigh back making Canadian bikes, and so that would be very interesting. But right now, the biggest challenge we have is trying to find bicycles. We also, part of Bike TO, we are going to be refurbishing bikes. As you know, in many of the apartment buildings, condo buildings all over the city, there's thousands of bikes sitting in parking garages that need to be rehabilitated. And I know we have a pilot project going right now to rehabilitate, repair bikes. But we're also going to be reaching out to apartment owners and condo boards to give us their bikes, and we'll repair them and make them available to children and others who cannot afford. So anyways, just wanted to update the committee on this exciting initiative. It's now going to be called Bike TO, Moving Together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other speakers?
I'll speak briefly, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I used to sit in your chair about 8 years ago. I was chair of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. And, you know, back then, Mr. Chair, the bike share program was called the Bixie Bike Share Program. And we contracted with a kind of rather dodgy company from Montreal, the city did. And Bixie was going to go bankrupt. Because we couldn't afford the program. And back then, it looked pretty desperate and dire. And I'm not saying it was easy, but we were able to find a way to pay for the capital and operating costs through some creative financing mechanisms and by finding a proper sponsor. So I will tell you that I fundamentally disagree that bike share has to be a losing arrangement, that we have to lose money. And the philosophy and ideology that we have to lose money is completely unacceptable to me. There are many different places where the money that we, back in to pay for the bike share program could be used for so many other useful things. But the philosophy that we have to keep on plowing money into it is simply unacceptable. So I think, Mr. Chairman, we should kind of rein ourselves in on expansion programs, and we should go back to our staff and say, figure out a way how this can balance out, that you can work in a business-like way so that, I don't want to make money on it, but I don't want to lose money on it. And there's fundamentally examples on how you can do that And instead of just surrendering and say, we're going to hemorrhage money like the TTC hemorrhages money, I don't buy it. I don't accept it. And I think it's no way to run a business like Bike Share.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Wong. Any other speakers on the item? Since it was my motion, I just should share a couple of words that I wanted to thank the leadership at Bike Share and of course Cycle Toronto for their support on this. It has come up to York Centre, Ward 6, and it's been extremely successful. We had a big launch. The bike station that was referenced in some of the comments at Sentinel, just south of York University, is, I'm under the understanding, it's one of the busiest docking stations in the city. But, you know, to keep a program successful and to make sure we minimize losses, we have to reinvent it and re-energize it and refresh it and create new opportunities and incentives for people to use it. And giving them more time to avoid the overcharge threshold is an incentive to use it. Looking very closely at how we can expand discounted bikes throughout the city to marginalized communities, I think that's worth getting some feedback from staff. And of course, because we want to align the usage of bikes, Bike Share, and our regularly cycling infrastructure, I think it's important when we think of locations of Bike Share, we should also be thinking and aligning them with our active TO bike lanes. This is simply a report from city staff to take a look at this infrastructure, to take a look at this program, and come back with any improvements. If you let a city program just wilt on the vine and you never take another look at it and try and refresh it and reinvest in it, it withers. And what we don't want here is something that just gets stale and bored, and we alienate our users. So I think this is an opportunity to do that. I know that Councillor Bradford was also very plugged into this, and I want to thank him for his advocacy over the past year as well for revitalizing the Bike Share program. So with that, I would simply ask for your support for city staff to take a look at this. I know some work was done on it a little over a year ago, and it's time for another look and a refresh, because unless we look at our city programs on a regular basis, they won't function the way we want them to. So those are my remarks. Any other comments? No? Okay, the item before us, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now, has everyone had a look at Councillor Layton's motion regarding item number 4, transition of Toronto's Blue Box program?
I'm happy to talk people through it just very briefly if that, if it's the pleasure of the committee.
Yeah, Mike.
I'll first just thank Councillor McKelvey and our solid waste management team, as well as the clerk and Scott Pasternak, our legal counsel on the committee, just for their help with this, in doing this really quickly. So if it's not perfect, I'm not going to take offense. If you disagree with the very premise, I may challenge you on it, but that's fine. So recommendation 1 speaks to the need for the city to have some advanced knowledge of the draft regulations. I don't think it's much to ask for at least 5 business days in advance of the wider public consultation. For this 5 business days is what staff had suggested to me. We're only going to have 30 days to comment on this if it's posted for the minimum amount of time. I sure hope it isn't, but it could be very limited, the amount of time we have to review this and bring something to council if we only have 30 days, which is a huge problem. So that's number 1. It just also speaks to why we need a little bit more time. The second one is a multi-part piece, but begins with us communicating to the Minister of the Environment that changes to Toronto's Blue Box Program EPR regulations have clear and measurable goals, targets, and outcomes, and penalties that ensure producers are accountable for reduction targets, and are consistent with provincial interests stated in the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. I don't think that comes as a surprise that we would like it to have some goals and targets. That the policy tools and incentives be there to promote the use of more recycled content in products and packaging, including incentives to redesign products and packaging. C, that the EPR regulations not allow for recycled content to offset the recovery targets, and that producers are required to report on subcategories of material. D, that the eligible sources include all multi-unit residential dwellings in Ontario during transition, commercial and municipal buildings, including parks and public spaces, schools, and municipal operated facilities such as community centers and arenas, and include packaging and packaging-like products recovered from the waste stream. So this is ensuring that the people that are producing it, the whole intent of EPR is extended to all pieces of all parts of municipal collection, and that we're not really holding the bag on it in the end. D, that eligible sources include all multi-unit residential dwellings in Ontario during transition, commercial and municipal buildings.
Be careful, so they might try and pull it out.
Sorry, I think I'm reading that one twice. My apologies. Finally, number three, or not finally, but number three, City Council requests the City Manager, Mayor, and General Manager of Solid Waste Management to communicate to the Minister of the Environment to protect the deposit return system and explore expanding deposit return as much as a means of increasing recycling rates. And this is to acknowledge that we know deposit return is in fact the most effective way of reducing the amount of resources needed. And four, that City Council request that the General Manager of Solid Waste Management provide all members of Council communications material to share on potential and proposed changes to the Blue Box program as a result of proposed extended producer responsibility regulations. This is just acknowledging that a lot of our offices may want to communicate what these proposed changes are to our constituents. And it would be really helpful if we had some of those snazzy infographics from our folks at Solid Waste Management, who I believe actually do quite an effective job at communicating messages out to the public. So that's the motion. I'm happy to table it now. And again, my thanks to Councillor McKelvey and others who contributed at this late notice. I don't think anything's out of the ordinary with it, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions. Seeing none.
Thank you. Oh, not so fast, not so fast. Any questions for the mover? Okay, let's go fast, let's go fast. Any other speakers on the item? All right, well, I guess we can get this through committee, and if this, in the interim, I guess this will be dissected a little more closely en route to council. And I'm going to support because I don't understand it. You're going to support because you don't understand it? Yeah, I read it all, but I don't understand it. I don't know how you were able... I understand the words, but I don't understand what they mean put together. We're gonna have a deep explanation at council.
I had been working on it previously, and staff this has been reviewed by staff to ensure that it at least isn't going to trip us up.
Oh, okay, so you were doing the groundwork on this before committee.
I didn't start this morning, no. But I would say that it's helpful. It's helpful that staff made themselves available in the days leading up to this, as I know they met with a couple of you to present the situation that we're facing. So that is very helpful. Thank you, Matt and team, Annette, Charlotte.
Councillor Perusa, did you have questions for the mover? No, I appreciate your honesty. All right. Okay, any other speakers? If not, I guess we'll put this to a vote and let council sort it out. Is Councillor McKelvey? No? Okay, all those in favor of the motion before us? I see most hands going up. Okay, and the item is amended? All those in favor? That is approved. So we have, no, that's out of order. I'm sorry, we are not finished yet. I appreciate your enthusiasm to leave. There's one other item. It is Councillor Cole's item. Oh, I do apologize, yes. We do have one item in between, item 10, service line warranties. And we have a deputant on the line. Jeff Olson is on the line. Jeff?
Yes, I am.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
I can.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, council members. My name is Jeff Olson. I'm the general manager for Service Line Warranties of Canada. On behalf of our firm, I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to address this committee today and to thank the chairman for bringing forward this motion. I've provided supplementary materials which should serve as a guided overview of our company, our experience, and how our program can be of substantial benefit to the homeowners in the City of Toronto. Service Line Warranties of Canada is a subsidiary of HomeServe PLC. HomeServe was founded in 1993 in the United Kingdom and has grown to a market cap size of over $2 billion. We are the largest international service provider for service line warranty programs and currently operate these programs in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, and Japan. Many homeowners do not realize that they are responsible for the private side of their service lines extending from the public infrastructure to their homes. The cost of repair and or replacement of those service lines can be extremely expensive. Most homeowner insurance policies do not cover or do not contain coverage, for these service lines should they fail. Service Line Warranties of Canada provides an optional warranty program for residents to mitigate this risk. Through our North American business, we currently operate service line warranty partnerships with over 900 municipalities and utilities. From these partnerships, we've enrolled over 4 million homeowners, encompassing 7 million individual service contracts. Over the last 3 years, we've processed over 1.3 million claims and saved homeowners over $454 million in private infrastructure repairs. There is no cost to the City of Toronto to offer this optional program to your constituents. There's also an optional revenue component available to the city. Most of our Ontario municipal partners have opted to take a royalty from us. However, it can also be applied as a discount to the homeowner premium. All private infrastructure repairs are done by local Toronto-based, licensed, bonded, and insured contractors. As of today, we have partnerships with over 64 Ontario municipalities, including the Region of Peel, Utilities Kingston, and the cities of Hamilton, Ottawa, and Windsor. Additionally, we have strategic corporate partnerships with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We launched this program in Canada by way of an interlocal RFP tender, which was issued by the City of Hamilton in 2014. All 64 of our Ontario partners have used the interlocal component of that Hamilton agreement to facilitate their partnership with Service Line Warranties of Canada. The City of Toronto is fully indemnified by Service Line Warranties of Canada with this program. The program also is currently tracking at a 98% customer satisfaction rate across our 64 partnerships in Ontario. Again, the Service Line Warranty program is optional for Toronto homeowners. We offer coverage for the private water service line, the sewer lateral, and the interior plumbing and drainage in the home. Each product can be purchased together or separately with monthly costs ranging from $5 to $20, depending on the coverage selected by the homeowner. All components of the program are administered by Service Line Warranties of Canada including the marketing, the enrollment, the billing, and the claims. The partnership itself is essentially a co-branded marketing arrangement between the City of Toronto and Service Line Warranties of Canada. Service Line Warranties of Canada also has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and has received numerous customer service awards for excellence in the industry. In conclusion, this program provides peace of mind for homeowners in the City of Toronto. Aged infrastructure, both on the private and public side, is an ongoing challenge for municipalities. Public-private partnerships such as this one can be of great benefit to all stakeholders, especially now in the time of COVID, where so many workers and their families are operating from home, and by doing so, increasing the incident rate of service line warranty failure. This is a program that can mitigate the significant financial risk of these service line failures. Vulnerable homeowners in your communities, especially seniors, fixed income, and or those who reside in older homes with aged pipe, are especially at risk. A service line warranty partnership with Service Line Warranties of Canada will allow the City of Toronto to offer an optional risk mitigation program for your constituents without capital investment or administrative cost. I want to thank you again for your time and consideration of this motion today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions for the deputant? No? Questions for staff? No? Speakers? No? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, now we can go back. No, we can look at the final item, item 11. Councillor Cole. Questions for staff? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Have staff had an opportunity to review the motion?
Through the chair, we did get the motion very briefly. We took a look at it, yes, before it came to committee.
So this would involve taking out a lane of traffic on Yonge Street between St. Clair and Lawrence, is that correct?
Through the chair, the limits of the potential change would need to be reviewed as part of a feasibility analysis. But yes, whatever the limits are, it would involve removing one lane of traffic in each direction.
How many lanes are there going north or south? Is it two on each side?
There are 2 lanes in each direction. Some intersections do have auxiliary turn lanes as well.
I see. So, and this is a main artery to get in and out of the downtown, is that correct?
Yonge Street does function as an arterial road. Some sections of Yonge Street carry higher volumes of traffic than others. It's something we'd have to review in detail before proposing any change.
And, you know, the Yonge line, that closes on a regular basis and runs buses. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it does. The Yonge line has shuttle buses overnight. And when there are either planned or emergency closures, TTC runs surface transit buses on Yonge Street.
So if this were to be implemented, you would have an arrangement where the Yonge line, which carries thousands and thousands and thousands in the AM peak period, would have to lay on buses and would be subjected to one lane of traffic.
That's certainly something that would need to be reviewed as part of the review of any change to Yonge Street and put forward to council for consideration.
I see. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've finished my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes, Councillor Peruzza, questions for staff?
No, I was ready to vote.
You're ready to vote already? Okay, are there any other questions for staff? Are there speakers? I have to speak because I'm amending this. Sorry?
I'll speak.
Yeah, so if it's okay, I'll just put my amendments on the What I see on the screen is not what's in my hand. Okay, there we go. So what I've done is, in respect for the local councillor, and I realized when I first saw his motion, it was problematic because I would not favor taking out lanes in that stretch, and we already have two processes going on: Reimagine Young and Young Tomorrow. So what we've done is, with these amendments, is we've softened it up to consider and explore, and potentially as part of the Young Tomorrow process. So I'm prepared to support a look at it, but I'm not prepared to endorse it here at committee. And that's pretty well all I have to say. So my amendments do not support an immediate action by staff to approve it, which can't be done anyway. But it softens up the motion and asks staff to take a look at it. That's all I have to say. Any other speakers? Yes, Deputy Mayor, and then.
Yeah, I appreciate, Mr. Chair, I appreciate your efforts. I will support the amendments. I won't support the motion. I think we've moved far too fast. The people that I've heard from are dramatically opposed to initiatives like this. Congestion and gridlock are getting worse in the city of Toronto. There has been some comeback in terms of the traffic, and it's just, it just makes matters worse in the city. And now we're adding on walking on the committee, a new street, Yonge Street, which is an important arterial road, and also which is one of the main roads that's used for for the Yonge line, which is the most critical line in our city. And when it breaks down, and it breaks down a lot, it'll be havoc for transit users and car users alike. I think we should take a breath, to say the least, in terms of what we've done so far. And we shouldn't move forward with this particular initiative. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers on the item? Councillor Cole? Oh, sorry, Councillor Layton and then Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be supporting the item. I'll support it without the amendments. But part of that is we have left a significant gap in our cycling grid in the city of Toronto, particularly going from north to south. And that gap has been identified by users. It's I suspect we will be able to see it reflected in data. But we have left this gap, and it's our duty to build other safe infrastructure out on our streets. We see globally cities doing this, and we made some big steps, and kudos to staff for moving heaven and earth in the last couple of months to get these lanes built that weren't in the capital plan 8 months ago. And I know that this is a tall order to ask of staff putting it into the 2021 budget, but I think it's time we start looking at the resources that we're assigning to making these 21st century improvements to our transportation system. We're never going to meet our climate goals, never going to meet our climate goals if we don't build out a minimum grid of cycling lanes. We have a target to reduce the number of trips being taken from the short trips being taken from automobiles down dramatically. We are not going to do that unless we build safe infrastructure. And the adage, the Kevin Costner adage, if you build it, they will come, is true. We see that happening. If you look out onto our streets now, if we make infrastructure where people can be and feel safe on bikes, on alternative forms of transportation, they will use them, notwithstanding that the distance might be greater, notwithstanding that there may be some bad days of weather, but we actually are seeing more and more people choosing other options rather than getting in their cars. And part of that is a health thing, part of that is an environmental thing, and part of that is a cost factor. It's just quicker and healthier and a happier way to get around if you're able to do that in your daily routine. I know it's not available for everyone, but if we don't even make those options available, those safe options available, we're never going to start to see this transition. And it's got to start somewhere. And I appreciate that it would have, if it came forward a different way, maybe that would be more ideal. But we're really starting to see the implications of building out that grid faster than we have traditionally done it before. And a lot of that has to do with willing communities. A lot of that has to do with fantastic staff we have at transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Councillor Cole.
Yes, I just think that the reality is that because of COVID, there are many Torontonians who are very reluctant to go on jammed buses, despite the fact that the TDC is trying to do its best with masks, also on subway stations. And I don't know if my colleague who doesn't like the idea of looking at this possibility realizes that you are risking your health before COVID when you try and get the subway at Yonge and Eglinton or Yonge and Lawrence or Davisville and Yonge. You risk your life every day when you get on those crowded platforms. So now you've got the huge crowds, and then on top of it, you're going to have this COVID risk. So what is the alternative then for residents who live in the Yonge corridor? What is the alternative? Are they all going to get in their cars? Well, if they all get in their cars, if you think there's traffic problems on Yonge Street now, you can imagine what the traffic problems are going to be like when people all decide they're going to get into cars, because they can't walk from Yonge and Lawrence downtown, or they can't walk to all the hospitals and universities downtown. So they need an alternative, and cycling is one of the alternatives that this motion asks to look at. Can we enhance protective bike lanes on Yonge Street with consultation with the community groups, with the business associations, and let staff look at it and come back with a report? Because it's not a matter that we can wait, to have the luxury of waiting to see what people are going to do and how they're going to get to and from work, to and from all the activities in the downtown core. So that's what this motion does. It just asks essentially that we look at this as part of the overall plan for expanding the bicycle network. And I think Midtown is an area that deserves an examination to see if we can make the mobility options available to people. Because right now, the options are very, very limited, given the fact, as I said, the subways, when they come back to where they were, are going to be very, very threatening to people to get on. And they can't all drive. So let's at least give them the opportunity to maybe take cycle to work. And that's what this asks for. And you can see this new reality is all over the place. You know, I'll just give you one closing story that illustrates this. Peter, who owns a series of laundromats in my ward here, he has a couple of children. He has a nanny because he's working around the clock fixing all the washing machines. So he was driving his nanny from Councillor Perutz's ward to his home every day, back and forth every day, because the nanny, the caregiver, was afraid to go on transit. And also, Peter was afraid that with the children, that this nanny being exposed to maybe COVID on crowded buses coming all the way from Jane and Finch was a risk to his family too. And so was so you know what he did? He said, okay, I can't drive you back and forth all the time. I don't have the time. Uber costs too much. So he bought her an electric bike. So now she is getting to and from her home to work on the bicycle. So she didn't have the money to buy a car. Peter can't drive her back and forth. Uber costs. So if you want more cars on the road, you want more inconvenience for people, you've got to get your head out of the sand and realize that we have to have this alternative of people using bicycles in a safe way, protective way, and that's what we're trying to do here on Yonge Street. At least look at it. Examine this possibility, this feasibility. We can't keep ignoring the new realities of mobility challenges and of COVID-19 realities, which may not be there for people who drive everywhere and have a nice car to get around in. But if you don't have that alternative of a car and you can't walk from Jane and Finch down to Eglinton Avenue, the cycling alternative may be worth looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other speakers on the item? No? Okay. Voting on my amendments. All those in favor? That carries. I should ask for opposed. I think there was one opposed. One opposed. And the item is amended. All those in favor? That opposed? That carries. Anyway, that concludes our business for today. Thank you very much. Committee members, councillors, visiting councillors, and staff, be safe out there. To those in the Jewish community, we wish you a Happy New Year and a Shana Tova. And we look forward to seeing everyone in person again soon. And keep safe out there. Thank you very much. And of course, thanks very much to our tech support and our clerk staff.